Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Okay, everyone. Welcome to our Infrastructure Committee meeting this morning. And as with the opening, there acknowledgement to country, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, the Darumbal people. Pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Also extend that respect to our neighbouring Aboriginal peoples within a local government area, the Gangaloo Nation people, the Barada, Kababarara and Yetimalara people, and also acknowledging the Torres Strait Islander people whose land is in the Torres Strait but who live, work on Aboriginal land. We welcome everybody to our meeting. Councillor Smith is actually total trooper, not feeling well today but still there attending the council meeting. So welcome Councillor Smith. We've got one leave of absence, the Mayor, and I had to Mayor came into work yesterday for a brief time even though he's on leave, so he's still definitely there, got the finger on the pulse of everything going on. So the Mayor is on a leave of absence, but the rest of us are all in attendance. Confirmation of minutes from the previous meeting, that was the 16th of August. Someone happy to move that they are true and correct? Councillor Kirkland, Councillor Wickerson, all... Oh. Councillor Kirkland, Councillor Smith. All those in favour? And that's carried. Now, any interest to Claire in matters on the agenda? And there's a couple there. Firstly, Councillor Smith, with item 8.1. 8.1. Yes, you have prescribed conflict of interest. You're going to leave the meeting for that single item?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Acting Mayor. Normally it's only if it's discussed at length, but
Yes.
from what we heard the other day at training, it's if it's on the program at all, if it's on the agenda, at all, you've got to leave. So I'd like to leave when we're talking about that first item, Mount Morgan Water Security, because of the... I can't see the board, Mr. Councillor Fisher. I can't see the screen, but it's my normal reasoning because my nephew has a contract to cart water, but also the proposed pipeline goes past my brother and sister's properties as well.
Yeah, I would suggest from our training we did last Thursday that we take out, if Mount Morgan water security is to be discussed in depth, take that line out. And I think through the chair, if the only way to deal with it is actually separate the item out of that report. So we'll do it. We'll break it into all the other reports excluding the Mount Morgan water or Mount Morgan water security. So, okay.
Okay. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll do that. Then, Councillor Rutherford. Can you put that just so Councillor Smith can hear us?
Yeah, sorry. I'd like to request the meeting to consider whether or not I do have a conflict of interest in item 8.4, I think it is, sorry. Yes. So my sister and brother-in-law own Sergeant Signs, which is on Knight Street, a little way down from Lauger Street, but they do own a premises there. So I believe it's far enough removed from discussions around this item, but certainly put it to the table to see what the table feel about that.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
Councillor Rutherford.
I don't know whether you want to do Councillor
I was
Mathers in
gonna-
the same breath.
I was going to just ask the CEO, we could do Councillor Mathers and Councillor Rutherford's together as it's the same.
I do them separately.
Do them separately.
Yeah, because there is just the separation of the Act.
Okay. So, councillors, with that particular area, and I know that it's within Knight Street. It is a distance away. Councillors, I seek your consideration. Do you believe that there is a conflict? Councillor Kirkland.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I believe I signed that petition as well, because that petition, I think I signed it. Can you check that from memory?
We're not going to have a, well, we'll not have a quorum.
I suggest, just Councillor Kirkland, if you dealt with Councillor Rutherford's ones first, then Councillor Mather's one,
Yeah.
and then during the meeting I'll have someone scan through that petition to see whether or not...
Just with the potential with Councillor Rutherford, Councillor Mather wouldn't be able to vote on Councillor Rutherford because it's the same issue. Councillor Kirkland is potentially, so that leaves...
Sorry, okay, just leave it. Let me find Councillor Kirkland's one. Thanks.
Yeah. Just hold. So it's a dog's breakfast, this conflicts, isn't it?
I can't see how I would have a conflict, Mr. Chair, in the sense that it's the outcome of the petition is for the betterment of the entire region, for that region, and I don't stand to benefit from that individually.
If you recall from the training last Thursday, if you put a submission in on a planning application, you have a conflict of interest. So the issue, so they would say, even though this isn't a planning matter, it's still same type of thing. So yes, I'll have to try and dig up that petition, Mr. Chair. Not a chat. Can't recall, Councillor Kirkland.
Just take a 5-minute
Can we,
recess just to allow...
unless we skip forward, Mr. Chair? Yeah. Skip that.
Do you want to go on to the next?
Oh,
But that's got just adjourn for... Well, I've just got to check with as far as who can vote on the conflicts. We'll just adjourn for 5 minutes. Move that the meeting adjourn for 5 minutes and restart at 9:20. Move that. Seek a second, Councillor Mathers. All those in favour?
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine. Everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line. Ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine. Everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line. Ain't nobody left behind.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine. Everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line. Ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine. Everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line. Ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Okay, all good. We'll resume the meeting. Okay, so we were just at with our sort of interests, declare interest, Councillor Rutherford. So Councillor Rutherford says why she has.
No, so Councillor Rutherford's made a declaration that she has got a conflict of interest
Okay.
and wishes to participate in the meeting and participate in the vote. Yep. So now you've said that,
Councillor Mathers.
Councillor Mathers now needs to do the declaration.
Thanks
Sorry,
very
I'm
much.
pointing fingers everywhere.
Thanks very much, Mr. CEO. So, would you like me to do the whole declaration of interest, or the declaration of interest on behalf of Councillor Rutherford?
Yeah, on
Yes,
Councillor Rutherford.
Okay.
Yeah.
Acting Mayor, I'd like to declare a declaration of interest in regards to the fact that Councillor Rutherford is my sister, and I will leave the room while the decision is being made on her declaration of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Mathers. Okay, just let that door shut. Okay, so Councillor Rutherford then reads the reasons why she believes she can stay in the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. So it's a little bit confusing, and this is why I'm struggling just a little. Initially, the report, I believe I could stay in the meeting because Knight Street is quite a heavy collector route, but Lauger Street and White Street, that intersection, I think Lauger Street is mostly impacted more than the flow of White Street and Knight Street, and I think my sister and brother-in-law's property is far enough away for it not to have any real impact. That being said, I do have a suggestion to make about the removal of White Knight Street as a B-dub route, and if there's a discussion about that, then I believe I would have a conflict of interest. So that's where I'm torn. And if the discussion was to go down that path, then I would not stay in the room for the vote. I would leave for the vote.
Yes, I think that's...
But until the discussion is had, I don't know where that sits. Mr. CEO, is that? Yeah.
Yes, that's the confusing...
I don't know how else to explain that, really.
There.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's about 3 blocks from your family's business from
No, it's only about a
the
block.
same block.
Yeah.
same block.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's yeah. So the report as such, I think, was fairly self-explanatory.
That's
However,
right.
my suggestion would make a big difference. But you know,
That's correct.
yeah.
Well, I open it to the councillors. Councillor
So-
Wickerson.
Oh,
Yeah.
Councillor
Of
Kirkland.
Councillor Kirkland, then Councillor Wickerson.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just clarifying, are we giving opinion or just asking questions at this point?
You're probably asking questions of Councillor Rutherford
Yeah.
at this stage, or me, or the chair.
So through you, Mr Chair, to Councillor Rutherford. So if there hadn't been a petition signed and this was a explanation of works that were to happen on Knight Street, which is where your brother and sister-in-law live, would it not be a conflict of interest anyway?
Sorry, can you repeat?
My question is, if there was, we're going to be presenting works to happen on Knight Street as your potential works on that street, White and Knight Street are basically the one. So if there was no signature on the petition, because they reside in that street, ordinarily, would we not declare a conflict of interest?
Yes, but I think it would still be the table's decision. I would still come to the table for a decision. It doesn't automatically rule me out. It was no different from Councillor Wickerson living on Upper Dawson Road. So it's whether the benefit is any greater or lesser. than those around. So I would still bring it to the table, you know. And if people feel awkward, I'm happy to step out. It's not a drama one way or the other. So.
Councillor Wickerson.
Oh, thanks, Mr Chair. I'm happy to move that Councillor Rutherford stay in the meeting for a couple of reasons. And as Councillor Rutherford said, fairly similar to mine, where I live in Upper Dawson Road, and there's works a few blocks down the road, so we need to be consistent with how we decide these things. But also the nature of the works, I can't see that there's any financial or business benefit or detriment. It's making the area safer, more so than any financial gain to be had. So for that reason, happy to move.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Wickerson. I do agree with consistency, that this is the way we've dealt with other matters like with Upper Dawson Road. So I agree with that sentiment. Councillor Latcham.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Excuse me, block nose. Through you through to Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Rutherford, how far is their property from Park and Knight Street on the map?
Oh, I have no idea.
Or is it on that corner? Pretty certain to see.
Well, can we pull it up and so people can see?
Is that possible, Karen?
I think Park Street is the one that comes out near their property, and I think Lauger Street is the one back towards Main Street from memory.
This one. That one. Back. We won't show anyone better. So that's where Park Street is.
Okay, so theirs is just, I believe,
Not the border.
just on that corner, in that bottom, see where the name Knight Street is?
Yep.
If you just go to the corner, they would be down over, just off the page.
Just there.
Karen? Yeah, just over there. That's Holcomb, just up there, is that right, the cement?
That would be right, yeah.
Yeah, so they would be just...
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
comfortable, but it's too close for my liking.
Okay. Councillor
Yeah,
Kirkland?
thank you, Mr Chair. I think, ordinarily when we see planning and that sort of thing, and we've got any family, especially when they're brothers and sisters and close like that, we really should declare an interest and leave the room. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Rutherford, just...
Mr Chair, if you don't, because it's split and I'm cognizant
Yes.
of that, I don't want it to go to a vote and you having to use a casting vote, so I am happy to leave the room.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's
So
how
you
people
withdraw
feel.
your...
I'll withdraw and I'll...
And Councillor Wickerson
Leave the
withdraw,
room.
and
Yep.
you'll... Yeah. Okay, no, it's just, yeah. Yep. Okay. Okay, Councillor Mathers.
Thanks very much, Deputy Chair. Deputy Mayor, sorry. I have I have declared that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 8.4, response to petition due to my sister and brother-in-law, Marie and Shane Sargent, owning Sargent Signs. They own the property in Knight Street, on the corner of Knight Street and Park Street. So just wanted to declare that and put that to the table.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I have to decide if I want to stay. Oh, yes, well, that's what I was putting to the table. So I'm happy either way, so I don't need to die on a hill over this at all. But I would just like to say that obviously any changes that may or may not be made to this road or this intersection further down, I really don't see it's going to have any impact on putting more or less vehicles onto Knight Street that may or may not help to, you know, help their business prosper in any way. But like I say, I think I'd like to stay to be involved in the discussions and see what decisions have been made. But if you don't think that's correct, I'm happy to go. I won't cry over it.
Yes. Councillor Rutherford.
Thanks, Councillor Fisher. I declare an interest in the decision as to whether or not Councillor Mathers has a conflict of interest, and I will leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. So you'll leave the meeting now, and we'll... Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Mathers has asked the council table if we feel that he has a conflict. So open that up to Councillor Kirkland.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Councillor Mathers, I think that with family so closely aligned to the street that's being affected, it is a planning thing. So as with previous, we've got family that are brothers, sisters, close to us, husbands, that sort of thing. We would declare an interest ordinarily, so I would think that this constitutes a conflict of interest.
Okay. Other comments? Okay. We've got to...
So effectively, I think Councillor Kirkland moved a motion that Councillor Mathers has a conflict of interest and should leave the meeting, and you'll just need a seconder for that.
Okay. Seconded, Councillor Wickerson. So all those in favour? That's carried. So, okay. So that... Okay. Well, we can actually get down to the nitty-gritty of the committee meeting.
Sorry, if you could, Peter.
Yeah, we just need to record the actual details of each vote for that last.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. So, moved Councillor Kirkland, seconded Councillor Wickerson, and all those who voted in favour were Councillor Smith, Councillor Kirkland, Wickerson, Councillor Smith, Councillor Latcham, Councillor Fisher.
Mr. Chair,
Kirkland, yes.
Mr. Chair, just for clarity for those who potentially are sitting on the other end of this watching, and we had those early discussions about petition and whether or not I had signed on. Looking back at the petition, I can happily say that I had the good sense to not sign it. So.
And I think that's probably one of the ones, I don't know if that was discussed in that training, but it's actually really good advice to councillors. Don't get involved in signing petitions, because it actually, you lose that opportunity
to be a voice.
Yeah, so it is. You're actually, sorry, Mr. Chair, you're actually stating your personal opinion when you sign petitions or submissions, so it becomes your personal opinion. So hence, that's when the conflict
Yeah.
arises because it's now your personal interest.
I know it's a weird world that we live in as councillors. Councillor Mathers.
Yeah, Councillor Fisher, I just want to say that's a very good lesson to be learnt for someone who's new to the table as well, because that's, you know, something I probably would have, to show my support, would have signed a petition to show my support of my constituents. But you live and learn, so I know now. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 6. There's no business outstanding. Item 7, no public forums or deputations. So we'll move on to the officers' reports, and that's the project delivery capital project report minus the Mount Morgan pipeline. So we'll deal with that totally separate. We don't need to move that.
You'll have it in that resolution that will be...
Okay. Andrew, good report. So,
Let's do Mount Morgan.
okay. Councillor Smith. Okay. Okay. I think so.
Karen has to blank me out, I think.
Okay. Yep, no, that's... I reckon so. Okay, so Councillor Smith is now in the lobby. So I'll pass to Peter.
Yes, okay, so the first report we're doing is Mount Morgan, and I just want to correct within the report the title. So if you, for 8.1, it's titled as Mount Morgan Water Security, but the project now is Mount Morgan Water Supply Pipeline Project. Okay? So it just, that reflects the title in the op plan and where we are today.
Yes.
It's right in the actual attachment, it was just an error in there. Okay? Over to you, Andrew.
All right,
Andrew.
thank you, Acting Mayor, Councillors. I'd like to present the August Capital Project Report. So the first project, Mount Morgan Water Pipeline Project. So majority of the survey and geotechnical field work has now been completed, and AECOM are working through the detailed design. The Package C, which is the Greater Mount Morgan works, we expect that design package to come to Council end of this week. They're currently reviewing it, and then it'll come through as a package for us to review. Package B, which is the Razorback work, which will be the contracted works. We expect that to be delivered by the end of September. And Package A, which is Gracemere to the Razorback, which will be the other component that we'll be doing in-house, is expected late in October. We've been working with them in the development of a specification for the pipe, and we're hoping to try and get a tender out this weekend for the supply and delivery of the pipe for the project. So, we obviously bought last week or week before the adjusted alignment to council, so that's all confirmed and locked in now. All right.
Andrew, probably one question just with the tender. Is there a specification of Australian made or open to manufacture from around the world?
My understanding is the ductile iron will only come from overseas. We don't manufacture it in Australia, so obviously we'll put it out and see what's out there.
Yes?
But yeah, from my understanding, it is an overseas manufactured product. So.
Thank you for that. Now, Councillor Wickerson has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Chair. Just through you to Andrew, the alignment that we looked at the last meeting, I couldn't quite recall, is that in the public domain as yet? Just having a little bit of community interest in where it's going. They were aware of the former alignment, but now it's been changed. I'm just wondering, is that able to be shared?
It certainly was obviously part of the council report, so that's
it's good
public realm now. So.
Okay, no, thank you.
Our intent, we haven't finalised it, but is to get that up to the community and do that information session in relation to confirm the alignment.
Thank you. Committee Chair, Councillor Kirkland, I should have come to you first, but your light wasn't on.
No, it wasn't. Thank you, Mr Chair. After the Chair has mentioned that pipeline, I thought to ask about, obviously there's delays in getting things from overseas, and now that you've confirmed that we would definitely be getting that pipe from overseas, would the successful tenderer be putting something in there around delivery that's going to, that's probably not a question I can ask. Are you anticipating that there's going to be delays?
Through the Chair, there may be, we just don't know. We need to get it out there, get it out into the supply chain and just see what they come back with.
I was just going to add that the whole purpose of the tender is to secure and remove that risk of supply. So that's what we're doing up front. So that's why the tender or the project's being approached as the principal supplying the pipe, so that we can remove that risk.
Any other questions, councillors? So, Councillor Kirkland, as Chair, are you happy to move that that report be received?
Definitely, it's exciting and very happy to move that. Let's get things going.
Councillor Rutherford, as the councillor, you're happy to second? All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you for that, Andrew. We will just bring Councillor Smith in from the lobby, and then we'll follow on with the other sections of your report. Yes. Welcome back, Councillor Smith. Chasing the cat, I think. Yes. Welcome back. Okay, Andrew, for the next stage of your report.
Thanks, Chair. Hail damage insurance claims. So this part of this project's nearing completion. We've the main transfer station at the landfill. That's the roof is majority of that work has been completed, and we just have the oil shed and the weighbridge there to complete. Majority of the roofs at Kershaw Gardens have been completed, and we just have the sandstone amenities to complete there, and then they expect they'll go over to Victoria Park and just do those number of little smaller structures and have that completed by the end of September. There is some savings in that insurance claim, so we'll work with CAF and Kelly in properties just to work out what the next priority projects are. Alliance maintenance facility at the airport. So this project's progressed well. The council funded works, which BMD have been doing, will be completed by the end of this month. We have taken a component of that work, which is the car park for the hangar, out of their scope and given it to the hangar, the builder of the hangar, just in relation to demarcation and complications around access. So I've also advised our funding body of that, and they've approved that process. So hangars construction's continuing on. They're about 80% of the fit out completed there with electrical services and external cladding. They've still obviously got the main roof It's probably the next major component to finish there. So they're all on target for completion.
Andrew, I might just add for the councillors, talking to the Mayor, we're going to organise a tour in the near future to actually just look at the hangar when you're actually walking in the facility itself. It's enormous. Also, there would just like to raise, with sort of some of the infrastructure associated with the hangar, we've had to move the viewing platforms for the plane spotters, and they've had to be relocated. So the airport actually went on the front foot and have gone to the plane spotting community through social media to say that these viewing platforms are going to be moved a few metres from where they are located. Kind of happened in the busiest time for plane spotters when we're getting all the wide-body jets bringing in the Singaporean troops. But it has been sort of received fairly well within that community. But if anybody sort of mentions about the viewing platforms, it's just with the locations of the fencing, changes of fencing and other parts of the infrastructure, the minimum distances where those platforms will not meet the legislative requirements now, so that's why they've been relocated. Councillor Kirkland?
Oh, thanks, Mr Chair. Through you, Andrew, I'm not familiar with the actual full design of the hangars, and having seen them with the aeroplane flight I took last week, just wondering, are they going to be fully enclosed or open at the end of the day? Is it just a roof with the supports, or is
No,
it fully enclosed?
through the chair. They're fully enclosed. There's big electric doors
Right, right.
at the front of it, so they will enclose.
It's quite spectacular to
Absolutely.
see, and you can see it really well from Georgeson Park as well, if you go up there for a view. Have a look.
Just one comment on the doors, and I think this is probably one of the really good items that have come. The hangar doors were to be imported from overseas. They were about approximately $4 million, Andrew.
Yeah.
They actually engineered the doors in Australia, and I think it was about $2.5 million. So an Australian product, not an imported product, on the hangar has actually saved the project some money. I think that's a real credit to all involved in the planning, and just sort of shows that we can have Australian made, Australian designed, and using Australian smarts have come up with a really good option and suitable for a hangar of that scale.
Thank you. Botanic Gardens and Zoo redevelopment, so package 2, which is the visitor hub. We've just held back the release of that tender till next weekend. We're just going through some reviews with the drawings and with our peer reviewer, Conrad Gargett. So once we finalise that, the package is ready to go on the 16th, so next Friday. Package 3.
Councillor Kirkland?
Oh, I was jumping the gun. Andrew was just about to talk to what I'm going to ask a question, so I'll wait till he's finished. Thanks,
Okay.
Mr Chair.
Package 3, which is the playground. So we've been advised there is a bit of delay in the actual dingo structure getting into Australia. So just due to shipping. Our ETA for the balance of the playground and the treehouse structure, that's due late October, and then the dingo would come later in the new year, later in January, I suppose, in the new year. So we're still working with heritage approval. We haven't got the heritage approval yet, so we've, as I spoke last time, we've reallocated or repositioned the layout outside the tree root zones, and we've put that all through to heritage for approval. We're just waiting on that. So as soon as we get that, we'll anticipate we can commence a bit of work, pre-work for the civils, and get that project underway.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Yeah, Andrew, I just wanted to ask, because of the delays, and you can see that that's the delivery for the Dingo is not till January 23, this is there's funding for this project, so I'm just wondering if that's going to affect the funding, the delay and delivery of it. No?
No, through the chair, it works for Queensland. It's
Good.
July 24, I think the end date for that funding
Perfect.
is. So,
That's great.
yeah. And sorry, the package 4 was the enclosure refurb, so the macaque enclosure's been refurbished, and we're just working with the parks and zoo people in relation to the eagle enclosure. Tenders we've got are well outside our budget scope, so we're just working out how we can look at the scope, do a bit of value management, and see if we can get that project delivered. Glenmore Water Treatment Plant upgrade. So work continues on out there. The dosing shed, so the slab's completed and they've actually erected all the structural steel frame for that. Anticipate that the shed will be cladded and finished by the end of this month. The new stairs have been installed in the line room and are now operational. And we're just working with Alliance in relation to the reconstruction of the filters. Coming into obviously a peak period, we're trying to understand their methodology and what risk that has to us if we start taking filters offline. So we'll work through it with them and confirm a way forward there. Gracemere and South Rockhampton STP strategy. So this obviously has a number of projects associated with it. So the new caustic soda dosing system at South Rocky, so we've got the prelim designs for that completed. A new wet well for sludge pump station, so that's at South Rockhampton. So we're just working through some planning works for that and the location. Design and installation of penstocks in the bioreactors, so I have issued a variation order to Haslam a number of weeks ago. Obviously they have to have the penstocks fabricated, so I anticipate probably end of October, early November, that they may start the installation process, so we'll work through that with them. Once that's done, obviously we'll do a condition assessment of the fuses within the ditches and look at replacement of those. There's also investigation work been undertaken in relation to the digesters on that site and the viability of what we need to do to improve those. Upgrade of sludge lagoons, so we have the silting solutions working on, they've basically completed Gracemere with the exception of the ditch. They're working on North Rockhampton at the moment, and we'll then go over to South Rockhampton and look at dealing with the sludge in the lagoons. The missing effluent pipe at Gracemere STP, there's a missing section, I think FRW are working on that at the moment. Sewer diversion, so we're working on a project to, as part of that greater strategy, to divert the sewer from Gracemere through to South Rockhampton. So we've had some geotech completed in relation to a new pump station going in at Gracemere, and we're working with the infrastructure guys and FRW in relation to an alignment for the pipeline and working through the approval processes there. And the new South Rockhampton sewage treatment plant, we haven't commenced, but there's money in this year's budget to start the planning for replacement of that bit of infrastructure.
Oh yes, I just wanted to ask through you, Mr Chair, the variations and the new wet well, were they included in the scope of the budget? The budgeted scope?
Yes.
Yep.
Glenmore Water Treatment Solar Farm. So the termination of the original contract has now been finalised. We've taken delivery of the tracking system that's now secured on site, and I'm hoping that we can get out to tender this weekend for the installation of the new solar farm, so new solar panels and solar system.
Looking forward to seeing that. It's been who would think a small solar farm would be so much drama. But no, that's a good result to see that had been advertised.
Yep. Mount Morgan Pool, so we have now received the renders and the fly-through. Our intention is to survey the community of Mount Morgan, meeting with Matt Mansfield, just with the, I suppose, the concern up there of, or their want to keep the 30-metre pool. So our intent would be look to survey to see if they want a recreation pool or a competition pool.
Councillor Rutherford?
I'm just wondering about that survey because the last I heard we were going up for a public meeting. I knew nothing about a survey.
Mr CEO?
If I could. I was going to give the council an update this afternoon. I've had a couple of discussions with the mayor on this, and I think need to probably be a little bit more considered in relation to how we go about engaging with that community, with the community of Mount Morgan, and also I'm also wanting to check some of the previous information that's been provided to councillors around the integrity of the old pool or the existing pool. So I'm wanting to do that as well. So if I can dig up a bit more information, Mr. Chair, and I can catch up with councillors a bit later on if they like, if so wish.
I think that would be good.
Yeah. It only happened the last 2 days, last Friday, last Thursday, last week, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a big change because I've gone out to that community and said we're bringing draw illustrations out to you to have a look at, and
Yeah.
you know, we've been out in good faith about about that. To suddenly say that there's surveys going out, I think is just.
Yeah, sorry if probably used the right words. Yes, there is the plans that council have seen. The survey, I think, is a little bit more focused survey, not so much a wider community survey. It's around in discussing with the school, discussing with some of the other people around Mount Morgan itself. So, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to dig up through here. I've got to catch up with Matt.
Yeah. All right. I think that's one of the core. You know, that could change the whole atmosphere of the pool. So it probably is a very, very core decision or question. Yeah, that has a big impact. So.
Councillor Mathers.
Thanks very much, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, look, my question was going to be the same thing because I've actually spoke to residents up there and said the same thing, that we were going to come up there and have a face-to-face meeting with them, and I was under the opinion that we were going to be talking to them, giving them upgrade on the water pipe and also talking about the pool at the same time, is what I thought what we were talking about doing. I'm just very mindful of how we approach this and deliver the news and deliver the concept of the project to them, as opposed to people being along on the journey or being against it. You know, yeah.
That was the concern. So through the chair, that's the concerns I raised with the mayor. That when we go up and have the public meeting of the council, which I'm saying that we still do that, is that there's some fundamental questions I think council need to be able to answer, and that was a part of what this bit of information I'm trying to dig up today, and before we actually go out to do some consultation.
Okay, Mr. Chair, so we'll be discussing that later today. Okay. Alicia, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Chair, and I'm just back yesterday as well, so catching up on that front. But I would very much doubt that their funding body would provide or continue to fund us for a 30-metre pool, because it was achieving a lot of other goals around competition and, you know, other aspects. It was to bring it into line with the standards of swimming. So there would also be that aspect to consider, but we can talk further later on.
Thank you, Alicia. Councillor Smith, did you have your hand up? No. Councillor Rutherford.
Yes, Mr Chair, that what Alicia has just said was one of the things that we had ticked off early in the discussions about not being able to sort of keep the 30-metre pool was very much around the funding, and so, yeah.
Yep, North Rockhampton sewage treatment plant upgrade. So work's continuing on over there. They've installed about 200 of the piles, and they've started erecting a lot of the blade walls and walls associated with the inlet structure, and they've poured about 4 sections of the main reactor and oxidisation ditch. So they're continuing over there with pace.
Andrew, I've noticed there's some work on Lakes Creek Road at the moment. Is that part of the...
No.
They've got like large trenching, what are they called, trenching guards, or those...
Sorry, through the chair. The only other work I'm aware at this point that FRW may be carrying out on Lakes Creek Road is some access works to some of those mitigation manholes we put in for the backflow prevention from flooding. But I'm not quite sure if that's what you're talking about.
This is adjacent to the sewage treatment plant.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the work. It's the backflow project.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Riverbank Boardwalk, so that project's now completed. We have realised some savings there, so I'll be bringing a report back to council with identifying some projects to reallocate their works for Queensland funding to. Rockhampton Airport and security screening upgrade, so that project's obviously completed. I think they're looking at official opening sometime in October. And the solar design has now been completed. The Rockhampton Airport parking, so I'm pleased to say that work's now commenced on that, so they've done a bit of alterations to the islands on site, and the equipment's inspected this week, and hopefully in the next 2 weeks that they will have that installed.
Okay, any further questions to the report? Okay.
Again,
Councillor
Mr
Kirkland.
Chair, can I just say it's refreshing to have these updates. It's really good for us to communicate to the constituents. It's overall to just have that across broad brush understanding of where projects are at. So I appreciate the work that it takes to put that together, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirkland. Okay, no further questions. Someone happy to move that this report be received? Councillor Smith, Councillor Mathers, all those in favour? Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for that report. Now, move on to item 8.2 and the asset management plan footpaths. And Andrew to the table.
So yeah, this morning I'm presenting asset management plan for footpaths. So this is a revised asset management plan. The last asset management plan we have for footpaths was written about 2016, so that's when it was adopted. So I just wanted to provide a provide a bit of an overview of the key components of the asset management plan. So those elements are the asset description, the customer levels of service, the life cycle management plan, and the financial summary. So with the asset description, so the AMP covers all constructed footpaths within the road reserve, park recreation reserves, and other council-controlled land that are available for use by the general public. I guess the key word is our constructed footpaths is what we're covering with this AMP. So council's footpath network is about 226 kilometres in length. There's about 1,900 curb ramps, and it's valued at about $60 million. Customer levels of service. So there are three things that are considered when we're developing and defining our customer levels of service. They are our condition, what's the physical condition of the assets, functions, are the assets fit for their purpose, capacity, do we need to upgrade or construct new assets? So there are three things we consider. So from a condition perspective, this graph just shows the current condition profile of the footpath network. As you can see, the majority of our network is in a condition state varying from excellent through to fair. 85% sits in that space, and then the 15% sits in poor to very poor. That's a very typical condition profile that you'd expect to see for an infrastructure network. For functions, we're really talking about are our footpath widths adequate? And so 99% of our footpaths have a width that is greater than or equal to 1.2 metres. That's the minimum recommended width for footpaths. There are some instances where the space available in the road reserve, you might only have 1 metre, but like I said, 99% of ours are 1.2 metres or wider. And 50% of our footpaths in our high-use commercial and shopping areas have a width that's greater than 2.4 metres. So that's good. Capacity. So Council's objective is to provide a connected footpath network that supports healthy living and active lifestyles. So with this in mind, officers have reviewed the existing footpath network and they've identified a list of projects that fall into the following two categories. Missing links within the existing network that should be closed to improve connectivity, or opportunities for new strategic or recreational footpaths. So in total, there's approximately 31 kilometres of footpath that have been identified that could be newly constructed. So these projects will be reviewed and prioritised at a later date as part of that walking and cycling strategy implementation, our action plan for that. Life cycle management plan. So this is probably the most meaty part of the AMP. In the life cycle management plan, we define our asset hierarchy, which is how we prioritise our network in terms of renewals and even defects. We define our asset inspections, what frequency we're going to inspect the network. The frequency is higher for our higher usage footpaths. What criteria do we use to identify defects, and how do we complete our condition assessments? So based on the condition assessments that we can undertake and the values of our footpath network, we've been able to define a renewal demand for the footpath network. Acquisition demand is also defined in the life cycle management plan. As I mentioned, that demand is based on that network analysis that's been completed, trying to put a dollar figure on how much are those projects that we've identified that could be, the missing links or the new recreational or strategic footpaths. So acquisition demand also includes other projects that asset custodians, for example, parks have identified around footpath upgrades within Botanic Gardens and Kershaw Gardens. Finally, the life cycle management plan looks at operations and maintenance. It considers historical expenditure, inspection and maintenance costs. In summary, in financial summary, we're really looking at whether what we've identified as demand, what needs to be spent on the network, how that lines up with what's available in our financial funding, so life cycle funding. So what's in our long-term financial forecast, or what external funding do we have available over the 10-year planning period? So just in summary, in that financial summary, there is sufficient funding for renewals. 94% of the renewals that we've identified are funded over the 10-year planning period. There is a reasonable level of funding for acquisitions. There's $7.9 million over the next 10 years that's been identified for acquisitions, so that's new footpaths or upgraded footpaths. About 900,000 of that is in parks, in Botanic Gardens and Kershaw, and the other $7 million is for those, those missing links or those strategic footpaths that you guys will prioritise at a later date. And finally, there's sufficient funding for operations and maintenance going forward. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Councillor Smith as Infrastructure Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. Hang on, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yeah, very good updated strategy. The only thing, when I read through it, and I totally agree with everything, but it's very hard now for smaller communities like Mount Morgan, Bouldercombe, to get on the list because there is so much demand for your footpaths in the more populated areas. If I could take Bouldercombe, for instance, we started a footpath project like 20 years ago. The community actually raised $6,000 to start it off, and we had a plan for 6 kilometres of footpaths either side of the Burnet Highway. You don't see too many communities doing that these days, but and now we can't get on the list at all because we're not big enough. And the same for Mount Morgan people, where a lot of people don't have a second car and they do walk to the shops and walk to the pool and all that sort of thing. So I just wondered how we do cater for our smaller communities with this strategy we have now.
I guess through the chair, that's really in terms of that walking and cycling strategy implementation. It's really about trying to prioritise, I guess, projects in those areas. If that's what that's really the only thing I can add to that.
Yeah, that's fine. I just thought I'd mention it because, when we did have a list and you said we're going to prioritise it again, but there's so many other projects in the more populated areas that really need doing, and probably the favourite one of mine is around the showgrounds. We don't even have proper footpaths around our showgrounds, like from the main gate down to toward the high school there. It's just a quagmire when it rains, and we don't have a footpath. There's a missing link there, and there's no footpath right along there. And I know cars park there, but I'm always a little bit embarrassed when beef comes along that people are, women walking in high heel shoes, and we don't even have a footpath for them to walk on around that important facility. But anyway, yeah, great asset management plan. Good to have that to refer to.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Rutherford.
Oh, Councillor Latcham's been waiting for a long time.
Is yours still related to Mount Morgan, or
Oh,
just
yeah.
continue with that? That's fine.
All right, thank you. Probably along the lines of what Councillor Smith was saying, and I just wonder, Andrew, thank you for the report.
Sure.
It's a great report. I do wonder about whether there is some way of ranking. I know with the rural roads, there's when they're classified, it's not just all about vehicle numbers. Other things come into play with safety, with bus routes, and the like. So I'm just wondering, when we start to rank some of these projects, whether some of those things can come into play. So it's not just purely population driven or whatever else, that it may be, the terrain of the of a footpath that would mean a concrete walkway would make it much, much safer, or anything like that. So some drivers that can be fed into the prioritisation listing, so it's not purely a population.
Yep. I'll take that one, stalking in the background here, thanks, through the chair.
I could feel him.
Yeah, so for the purpose of the asset management plan, we basically got 7.9 million over the next 10 years to spend on new footpaths. Now, how they will be prioritised will come back to that action that comes out of that walking and cycling strategy, which will fall in young Stuart's area. So they're the sort of things that we probably need to take into consideration. We did have that ranking process. It sounds like it's not quite hitting the mark with the council table at the moment, so that's a body of work we need to probably refine that a little bit. It does link to the hierarchy of the road that the footpath is on. It does link to whether it's around a CBD or a commercial area, a hospital, aged care facility, all those sorts of things. So we just got to try and get that balance right. But yeah, that'll sit in a body of work that Stuart will do. But for the sake of the AMP, we've essentially got $7.9 million to spend on those acquisitions, but not commencing till about year 4 onwards.
Can I just further to what Martin was saying, and I don't, because I was sort of running this through my head last night because there's never enough money to address these issues, and I was just wondering whether, when we sit down and we look at these things, do you go, well, that's a main feeder route, and that's a main feeder route to a particular area? Say it's a shopping precinct or whatever, or a school. They're the 2 main feeder roads. We'll complete those. Then it's, to me, not so important that the offshoots are done. If there's a main feeder road, at least to get the majority of pedestrians where they're going. Is that what you look at?
Yeah, that is part of the process, and we are trying to, it's a combination of, where it sits in the hierarchy and filling out those main connectors, as you've pointed out, and then identifying the missing gaps in those and try and complete a couple of networks. We seem to have a lot of networks that are about 2/3 finished out there. So it is trying to get which ones do we need to do first, and that sort of stuff does come into it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rutherford. Councillor Latcham, then Councillor Kirkland and Councillor Mathers.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. And through you through to Andrew. Andrew, well done on a great report. It was good to get a better understanding of the processes and what's involved with the amount of footpaths. I agree with Councillor Rutherford. We can never have enough money for enough footpaths until such a time that it's footpaths on both sides of the road. My question, I guess, is I notice there's 226 kilometres of footpaths and there's 82,000 people potentially in the region. So it's roughly less than 3 metres per person. Is there a benchmarking for regions of kind of a similar nature on that basis? How many metres per person, population basis?
Yeah. Look, there's not an industry benchmark that's available. I think the previous version of the AMP did try to go and look at other AMPs that other councils had prepared of a similar size and tried to benchmark against some of those. But the difficulty is trying to get up-to-date AMPs to do sort of that benchmarking against. But we can certainly try to do more in that space if that's what you guys would like to see.
I guess my second question, is pretty much a quarter of the asset replacement value has been spent the last 2 years putting in new footpaths and stuff, which is obviously very significant. Obviously, it would be good to see that type of commitment further on, but we're talking about only $790,000 per year for the next 10 years. It's not too. How many kilometres of footpaths does that get you, roughly?
From memory, I think it might have been about 16 or 17 kilometres
per year.
Oh, sorry, over the.
Oh, for the whole lot. Oh,
yeah.
Wow, that's not much.
I think that's right.
1.6 kilometres per year. Wow, we've got a long way to go. But good to identify it, and obviously it's something we've got to discuss budget-wise, because if it's an area that needs attention, we've got to obviously give it a bit more movement on it. Thank you.
Councillor Kirkland.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Excellent points that both my colleagues have just made, both Councillor Latcham with the shortfall of the need and Councillor Rutherford certainly with that matrix and what that looks like around safety and that sort of thing. So I'd like to echo their comments as well for the record. Page 14 of I think it's page 14 of the report, Andrew, it talks about the performance measure and the footpath condition and about 30% of the network being in a poor to very poor condition by the time it approaches that 90% of annual depreciation. I'm just wondering where that places us, and it probably comes off the back of what Councillor Latcham has said, in the risk register as far as, does this, as that 30% of being poor to very poor, with there's trip hazards and all those kinds of things, does that then enter itself automatically onto our risk register? Does it trigger something?
Through the Chair, not that I'm aware of, but we deal with condition and defects separately.
It's reactive, isn't it?
No, well, defects are captured as point objects along the footpath, whereas we just give an overall condition assessment for a footpath. So you might even get a footpath that's in a reasonably good condition, But if it's got displacement in the joints, there might be 3 or 4 defects along there, but it still might be the condition states at 3. So there's not necessarily a direct correlation between condition and defects. We deal with them separately.
Okay, that's interesting.
Just to explain that a little bit further, so every year there's a full audit of that is done that sets the work to do in terms of those repairs. So that's what, it's really the spot checks, the misalignment, that it's an englobo condition that says this footpath overall is condition 2. So it is quite important. They're 2 different things, how we function.
Is that by observation, or is there a machine that goes similar to what the roads do?
Inspection.
So it's just a physical inspection?
Someone walks the entire...
Yeah, I know that my colleagues have probably all experienced
And
those
then identifies
footpath
those.
eruptions where we've put them through as pathways, so that's just those are things that just happen, or would they have already been on that list?
Most of those are probably already on the list. You're just
Escalate.
well, you're not escalating, you're just reminding us that it's on the list. Okay. You're not changing priority, but we do that assessment and they rank them, and then we effectively let a works contract to go and machine them and adjust them. So it's done.
So I'll come back to my original question then. When you have identified that there are those footpaths that are in a poor or very poor condition, does that then trigger for those footpaths to be highlighted as a risk?
Not on the risk register. There'd be a general one potentially, but this is just work. This is works underway. That'll be work orders for civil.
No, effectively, through the chair, effectively they get put on a list that gets sent over to civil operations to address through their maintenance budgets and their renewal budget for that year.
Okay. What happens if the level of degradation exceeds the funding that's available to replace the existing footpaths?
If I just read this incorrectly, what it said was that we've got enough funding to basically do that. That's what this plan just said.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what.
Based on a visual check.
Based on the condition assessment, the amount of money, if I've interpreted this plan right, it says we've got enough money to do what we need to do. And the curve that you're talking about, where we've got some good ones and some bad ones, is pretty typical of what you would see in most assets like this.
All right. And please don't let my comments take away from the fact that it's great to have this report, and I appreciate the work again that's gone into it. Thank you.
Councillor Mathers, then Councillor Wickerson and Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Yeah, look, Andrew, I just want to say thanks again, like all the other councillors said, for the report, but also thanks for the asset management plan as well. It's something that is really good. You know, communication is key, and there's been so much discussion that's been had around this table in regards to, you know, footpaths and the lack of footpaths, and, you know, we've still got, 226 kilometres is still that's a lot of work that has been done. We've still got quite a bit more work to go, but one of the questions I had, it's really great to hear what Martin was saying in regards to that you're trying to prioritise filling in those gaps, because that makes a big difference when people get on these and can complete a circuit or complete a network. So I think I'm really pleased to see that that's becoming a priority. The question that I do have is in regards to, as we build more of these, and I understand we need more money, and I'm definitely prepared to try to push a little bit when it does come to budget time, because I think all the councillors probably know that our community is screaming out for more footpaths. It's one of the very common denominators that we have when we're talking to residents. But the cost of maintenance, are we allowing for that? As the network grows, it's going to be more upkeep coming for that, and obviously our budget is going to have to grow. So has that been allowed for in the budgetary?
Sorry, through the chair, that's been considered over the next 10 years, yes.
It has? Okay.
Yes, yep.
Okay, fantastic. So it looks like we've got enough funding for the maintenance, we just don't have enough funding for the building of filling in the gaps and building new paths. So yeah, that's up to us to try to get some money for you. All right, thank you very much.
Yep.
Councillor Wickerson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. It's probably a similar line of comment and then a question at the end, that they're great to see the asset management plan prioritising where the gaps are in the network, and I think we've chatted about that many times, and also a more strategic approach around schools and around aged care and whatever, because I think around the table we know that the health benefits of that, and also the mental well-being, being able to get out, especially for our probably more mature residents and also kids, I guess, to be able to get out and walk safely around our streets without fear of tripping over. Pleased with Councillor Rutherford to point out that it's more than that. It's also the terrain, if it's steep or the crossfall's too great to where we don't want our folks slipping over on wet grass or whatever, so that's all good. But the question I had, probably through to Peter, Mr Chair, we've just had a fairly major cycleway and walkway project through TMR with their funding of it. Do we know if in the future there'll be other similar programs? Because that must have been a great bonus to us to have to use other people's money to do some major bits of kit. I don't know what the total distance was, but it seemed to be everywhere you looked there was some quite significant pathways going on. I know Kershaw Gardens is hugely popular, but do you think that will be ongoing, or is there any hint that there might be future rounds of that similar program?
There is talk of other programs at the moment, with nothing defined, but yeah, I think there was obviously, for main roads, that was a good outcome for them, and they are saying there may be some extra money on the way.
Thanks, because my recollection was the initial program that came back to the table got scaled back a little bit for timing. I think it was more than lack of resources or our ability to do it. It was just the timing didn't fit into the funding round. Is that more or less?
That's true, and they are actively trying to get some additional money.
Yep, okay, no, that's great to hear. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Fisher. I'm not sure where this quite fits in, but I was just thinking about mobility scooters and the increasing use of those, whether they are a road form of transport or are they a footpath form of transport? And if they're footpath, how do we address that moving forward? Because I think it's just going to be the way of the future. Can anyone answer that?
I'm going to give a bit of a tag over here. I will
It's
just
a hot
comment.
potato goes around.
I just will comment one thing. I'm just going to add
Tag,
one
Stuart,
comment
you're
before
it.
you start, and that is how we clearly, in the future, will have to build wider footpaths. So the standard 1.2 is quite an old standard, and, and the idea that you build that today is not. Yeah, a lot of councils have a 3 metre even, you know, because of what you're describing, which is this other activities. Anyway, over to you, Stuart.
So through the chair, yeah, it depends on the speed of the mobility scooter, depends on where it's on the footpath or on the road. As an action from the walking and cycling strategy, there was an intent to identify some key routes within either the CBD or within Rockhampton that may be used by people with impairment or mobility issues, and try and bring those up to a standard that is consistent and I suppose able to deliver that. As part of the work we're doing for the identification of new footpaths, there is a consideration into the widths of those, and depending on what their function is, the size and width associated with those. So depending on some of the outcomes of that, which we're aiming to bring back to council, we can, I suppose, identify some widths that are appropriate for that. Moving forward, we're generally adopting like a 1.5 width as a minimum, and that allows, I suppose, for a mobility scooter, but doesn't allow too much space around them. But on other routes where we, potentially have high usage of those types of users, we may look to widen to 2 or 2.5. So we're trying to address that through the walking and cycling strategy to include, all users of all mobility types.
Yes, and Councillor Fisher, I can just add to that, because I guess that walking and cycling strategy, moving into the future, is probably broader than that, because we're now talking about electric scooters, electric bikes, mobility scooters. I think there's a whole range of things that, probably we need to start looking at, as we move forward, more than just walking and cycling.
Walking, cycling and cruising
and
strategy.
Yeah, and not just that the title needs to change, I'm not suggesting that, but I think our thought processes behind how we come to a decision probably needs to be broader. Yep.
Thank you for that. Actually, that is a very valid point, because a lot of our nursing home retirement villages, they're actually actively encouraging some of their more mobile residents to actually take up walking as a sort of a fitness regime. And I know I'm getting more and more concerns raised just with Dean Street and that activity now that in the Village Life are encouraging their residents not to call taxis but actually to walk to the services a block or two away. And Councillor Rutherford, you would have a similar sort of thing there with the facilities in off Wandle Road and Talbot Estate and that as well. So I think it's probably putting anomalies on sort of some of those designs that we have going into the future. So that was a very good point. E-scooters, that's another thing of altogether. I think we're going to sometime in the future there sort of question our decision there with these scooters there. I think they're going to be a really something there that needs sort of more mapping as whether they're on the road or whether they're on our pathways. Councillor Latcham.
Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor. I was probably continuing with that to Martin, if I may. Martin, sorry. So when we're looking at the working out where to put the new footpaths and stuff, will that factor in scooters as well, or e-scooters, now that they're fairly popular in the region?
Yeah, I think from my recollection of the walking and cycling strategy is that we do have a section there talking about e-scooters, so I think in the future we will need to look at where they could be. I think initially they were talking about major destinations, whether it's CBD, the university, I can't remember, might have been to the Botanical Gardens. We thought might have been a bit tough to get to at one stage, but yeah, so the short answer is yes, we'll be looking at that. Yeah, because they're starting to go out into the residential areas now that are still very popular. I guess the other question, part of the question is, given that you said this depends on the speed of the e-scooter, so I know like the New Horizon ones are set to 12 kilometres per hour. That's going to be about this benchmark in Queensland, as I hear in the news. But those who own their own obviously could crank them right up. Will they have to get off the footpath and get on the road, or how will that be monitored?
Similar to how we monitor, or through the chair, I suppose, similar to how you monitor speeds on the road. The driver has to drive at a certain speed. I can have a Ferrari that could do 180, but I'm still not driving 180 in a residential street. So the speed limits apply to all of those electric scooter type vehicles, regardless of their capabilities. Obviously, those that are similar to bikes, you can use the footpath to ride along on a bike as you can with an e-scooter, and so it's about maintaining an appropriate speed, and the road rules do say that cyclists are giving way to pedestrians on footpaths as well. So those road rules, I suppose, prevail in those circumstances, because outside of that it's very difficult for us as council to try and manage people on e-scooters and police that type of behaviour, and so we're diverting, I suppose, to the road rules there. In certain speed environments they can ride on the road. Over certain speed limits, the preference is for them to be on the footpath, and that's sort of into the Queensland legislation, so we'll just be abiding by that, but keeping in mind, I suppose, with our footpath widths and whatnot in areas that might be high use from e-scooters, we'll try and accommodate that wider width so that they can share it with other pedestrians.
At the end of the day, it's going to just be a police matter though, isn't it?
Yeah, ultimately, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mr Chair. Just, listening to all the comments and questions and everything, I've sort of been thinking, with our funding being pushed back in recent years, you sort of never make up that amount of footpaths. But I suppose the flip side to that is that people have seen us building the ones for main roads, and think that that's our contribution anyway. But the question is, do they ever liaise with us to see, give us a list of what they want to do, to see our opinion, to ask our opinion on that? Because the only upside I can see to the one we've done on Lower Dawson Road, because I come in that way all my life, and I've hardly ever seen anybody walking along there. It's not really a nice area to walk because of the traffic. We did inserts for parking outside the houses there, which I thought was a great idea. I just wondered, do they ever liaise with us to you know, to see if that's a good idea, or do we have any other ideas where they should be building them?
Good question.
Through the chair, I'll attempt to answer that one. I suppose with the most recent works done by TMR, they were done in very much a hurry because it was incentive type money or stimulus money on the back of COVID. So they really come out of the blue a bit, and we had to work fairly closely with TMR in a short time frame to deliver those. But having said that, in our previous list of prioritised footpaths, we did have footpaths listed along those routes. They weren't in our highest priorities, probably because of the reasons you mentioned, Councillor Smith, that there was not a real lot of evidence of great use at this point in time. But if you look strategically across it and how the main road system basically is the backbone of our whole transport system here in Rocky, and connects all our areas, fundamentally you would provide them sometime in the future. And they do connect up to things like the Yeppen and back into the back end of the Botanical Gardens eventually, and there's always been talk of trying to get that connection out to Gracemere, between Gracemere and Rockhampton as well. So strategically over time, I think they would have been on our list of things to do. It's just this bucket of money basically appeared out of nowhere as a stimulus. Main Roads were prepared to do it and do it to the correct standards. We worked very quickly with them at the time to try and sort out where they should go and how they should connect up. So it's a bit of a, I don't know if you call it a one-off type situation. Going forward, we have, I can't remember the name of the document, but there is a strategic document that's worked out between us and Main Roads about walking and cycling for our region. And I think that's coming up for review, I think sometime in the next 12 months. I think they've started talking to us about that already. So yes, there is a platform where ourselves, being council and Main Roads, can discuss what is the most strategic routes going forward.
Just got another comment, Mr Mayor, and one that used to be my favourite one about footpaths around schools. And to me, the state government should have been paying for those anyway. And you know, I mean, I waited and waited and waited, and the school at Gracemere was there for 30 years, and we thought we had to eventually do the footpath right around the school. But then I was told that some of the funding we get is for school footpaths. Is that still the case?
Through the chair, there's been a number of programs that have come and gone over the years through the state around funding for school infrastructure. There's been a few, several over the years that we've managed to get funding for. Some of those have been of varying sizes and requesting varying co-contributions from council. There is at the moment a school infrastructure funding that we can apply for footpath works around schools, but a lot of the time that has to be instigated by the school and brought to TMR or council in that space. But we are working with a number of schools to try and provide increased school transport infrastructure at the moment. So yes, those avenues exist. And as part of the walking and cycling strategy, we are providing a focus around the likes of schools and aged care facilities to try and improve some of the footpath network around the adjacent frontages of some of those schools. But in review of some of those, a lot of the schools do have quite decent footpath network on the adjacent frontages. It's the I suppose where it spreads out from the school onwards that we're looking to try and address as part of the walking and cycling strategy.
Thanks, Stuart.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions. Councillor Smith, as Infrastructure Chair, are you happy to move this report be received? Second, Councillor Rutherford. All those in favour? And that's carried. Councillors, I think it's 10:43. How about we adjourn just to go and grab a cuppa and adjourn the meeting to recommence at 11. We'll move. Councillor Wickerson, second. All those in favour? And that's carried.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine. Everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line. Ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine. Everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line. Ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
convene the meeting? Just give me a thumbs up when we're live. Okay. Council, we'll move on to the next. As I do that, my laptop suddenly goes into the sleeper mode. Okay, we'll move on to item 8.3, the Gracemere Water Supply Strategy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Morning, councillors. Council officers have undertaken a review of our Gracemere water supply network under the current conditions and also under forecast looking forward to future demands out to supply Gracemere. The work's been done in order to understand the limitations of our current network, but also to assist our long-term planning, I suppose, for Gracemere and water supply moving forward as a result of projected development. The Gracemere water supply strategy essentially highlights the infrastructure that's required to take us from a current max day demand of 11 megalitres a day out to a demand of 26 megalitres a day. And this roughly aligns with about 20 years of growth moving forward. So the demands we'll talk about today have been predominantly in terms of maximum day demands. However, they are directly correlated to growth in population. The reason we've linked them to max day demands is that we've used the council's planning assumptions model in order to come up with those demands based on development projections. However, they vary, as you well know, with regards to the economic climate and development. So it may be faster or it may be slower. So the timeframes there are based on council's planning assumptions model, but we've also linked them back to triggers in terms of megalitres a day to allow us, I suppose, a way to monitor a little bit more easily and use that as a basis for triggers moving forward. So part of the assessment of the existing network and the future networks identified, I suppose, three key infrastructure constraints. They are supply from the Athelstane reservoirs to Gracemere itself, distribution through Gracemere's trunk network, and then reservoir capacity and reservoir storage within the Gracemere network as well. So a range of different schemes were investigated and looked at ways to try and service this. However, the ones that are included here in the infrastructure triggers were deemed the most feasible and most reasonable. So, in consultation with staff at FRW and in infrastructure planning, we sort of arrived with the proposed infrastructure options that are included in this report. So, they've been broken down essentially into short and long-term, short, medium and long-term works. And as I said, they're linked to triggers within the planning assumptions model. However, we've linked them back to demand infrastructure triggers. So currently the supply from Athelstane Reservoir to Gracemere is not being utilised at full capacity, and that's due to the pumps at the old Capricorn Highway pump station not being able to accommodate those flows. So as that demand in Gracemere increases, there's a need to upgrade that pump station, and it also happens to be at end of life. So it'll be a full proposed upgrade to that pump station for both pumps and the building and structures associated with it. And in doing that upgrade will allow us to push out from 11 megalitres a day out to 19. And the estimated cost of this is around $2 million. So as part of the works that are done on the initial or the current network out there, there's also been some analysis on the storage capacity out there. And it's been identified that there's a need for some additional storage at Lucas Street in order to meet emergency storage requirements. So there's an existing 3.75 megalitre reservoir there. The site footprint has been designed and built to accommodate another 2 reservoirs. So there's a second reservoir needed to meet the current demand. However, with the instigation, I suppose, of the Mount Morgan water supply scheme, the trigger for the third is also sort of prompted at the same time. So there's 2 reservoirs at the Lucas Street site there, and they're proposed to be approximately $3 million each. So one's triggered as part of Mount Morgan, the other's triggered as a current environment. In the short-term period also, so the supply for Gracemere is fed from obviously Glenmore Water Treatment Plant, and that's fed through the Rockhampton water network to the Athelstane reservoirs, which then pumps to Gracemere. So in order to accommodate those increased flows, there's a need to ramp up the pumps at Glenmore Water Treatment Plant. and increase the pressure on those. So as part of that, which is sort of a gradual increase over this 5-year period, there'll be a need to install pressure-reducing valves on the offtakes of some of those mains that supply Athelstane and then supply onto Gracemere. So there's a budget of about $1 million there. There's several pressure-reducing valves along there, and they're not all needed at once. They can just be programmed into our future works in order to meet the increase in pressure as we go along. In the medium term, from that 6 to 15 years, there becomes a point where we get to 19 megalitres a day with the combination of pump upgrades. However, there's a need to push ourselves out that little bit further. And so in order to do that, there's a need to establish another base reservoir near the bottom of Maudsley Hill or close to the old Capricorn Highway pump station in order to be able to fill, I suppose, and supply the rest of Gracemere. So that base reservoir has enough storage to carry us out past the 20 years of this strategy, but it's been included at that size, I suppose, to a lot of the infrastructure costs and upfront costs. Makes sense to make it that little bit bigger to carry us forward with regards to storage. The estimated cost on that's around $11 million. As most of the growth in Gracemere is predominantly focused in that Lucas Street zone, so south of Lucas Street around that Washpool Road, Cherryfield Road type area, there's a need to improve the supply to that Lucas Street reservoir and then the distribution network from there. So there's an additional project there that looks to duplicate the existing 300 main in order to increase and maintain supply to the Lucas Street reservoirs and then the wider distribution network in order to meet capacity there. So that's intended to follow the existing alignment, like an offset from the existing alignment of the current 300 main, and allows, I suppose, that final facilitation of 19 megalitre out to the 26, and estimated to cost around $4.9 million. Beyond 26 megalitres a day, our ability to be supplied from Athelstane reservoirs becomes very limited. We're pumping it as much as we can, and the pipes, the mains there are sort of getting at their capacity. So as an alternate option, it's been investigated as a potential for a ring road main project or potentially another viable project as we get out to that later date and we get closer, I suppose, to needing that. However, that would follow a direct supply from Glenmore Water Treatment Plant, generally following the alignment of the ring road main and then coming in at the Gracemere Base Reservoir to supply. And that supplies us well beyond the life of the 20 years we're looking at. It can push well beyond that period. That's estimated at quite a significant cost of $42.5 million. However, I suppose we've flagged here that officers are going through a longer-term water supply strategy for the Rockhampton region, in which case, options or projects such as this may be investigated, I suppose, a little bit more detail. At the moment, it's out on the outer edges of this strategy and has been flagged as a potential project, but obviously for a project of that cost, a bit more rigour needs to go into how that could be achieved and what viable options there are as alternatives for that particular project. So in the table there's quite a significant amount of cost and triggers that are associated there. As I said, we've linked them to max day triggers as well as indicative years based on the planning assumptions, and they will vary, as we know, depending on development that occurs. So the recommendation from officers, I suppose, is for Council to endorse the strategy and recognise the projects there and recognising them both in the local government infrastructure plan and our long-term financial forecast. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stuart, for that. I think it's actually good that we're getting these real strategic long-term reports. I think that's something that I've found is something I like to be able to look to the future over the horizon, and I think this report does very, very well with that. I know the councillors there will probably have a few questions, but I'll go to the committee chair, Councillor Kirkland, first, and then take further questions from other councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do have a few little tags here that are indicative of a couple of questions. They're not all questions, don't panic. I just, on page 14 of the full document, there's mention there of a water network validation project. Can I just tag. I've not seen that or heard about it. So is there any way that I can get a copy of that or something? The validation project?
That may have been the water network model. So council engaged GHD to peer review our water network model. So we use that as the basis, I suppose, for some of the planning of this.
Yeah.
And that peer review just looked at whether the loads were appropriate, whether everything had been modelled appropriately, and I suppose that it was another check to make sure that what we were
just
using.
a peer review.
Yeah, just a peer review of our existing model network to, I suppose, validate, I suppose, what we're doing and the work that's been done by officers internally.
Yeah, thank you. Again, through you, Mr. Chair. So the conversations with FRW and the officers that sat down and discussed the two, gravity-fed or a pump option. So gone with the gravity-fed, which looks very like the best financial decision moving forward and certainly the best option. I just wanted to ask, with all of that, how the PAM was based on 4-point-something%, whatever that was, and then we've reassessed it at 2.5%, is that right? Just to make sure that what your assumptions are correct? Because the population growth hasn't been realised, correct?
So through the chair, we sort of sensitivity tested, I suppose, to see if there was a lesser population growth, what that meant in terms for some of those infrastructure triggers, and I suppose it highlights that there is and that's probably why the report focused more on the max day triggers, because if if the population drops to its 2.5% growth rate, then some of those timeframes get pushed out quite significantly. So yeah, it was done as a bit of a sensitivity test to show, I suppose, how sensitive it was to a change in population.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly ask about the money side of it. Of course, that's our job to make sure that we're asking that. I note that it's $9 million for those three recommended early 2022-23 projects. That's all in the budget, just making sure that that's already allocated. Peter, the full $9 million is in the budget, because it says in the bottom paragraph on page 6, just coming into the very beginning of the document, that the 3 stages of infrastructure development identified total the 67. Then it says the first 5 million, but up the top we're talking about stage 1 being 9 million. So I'm just wanting to make sure that the 9 million is in the budget, not 5 and missing some.
Through the chair, the entire budget required within the budget. It is a mixture of Gracemere and Mount Morgan project. That's why, because we've kind of triggered the two reservoirs
the two reservoirs instead of one.
Pumping station. So it's a mixture across those things.
Okay, so it's within the scope of the Mount Morgan project that balance is found.
Yep.
Perfect. That's all I wanted to make sure of. Good job. And then the Yeppoon PAM. So you know how you did your qualifying with the 2.5%. Did you also do that with Yeppoon? Yeppoon's growth has been huge. So I'm just wondering whether or not that extra demand will be realised and affect the model that you've already gone with to any degree.
Yeah, so through the chair, obviously there's a bit of sensitivity around Yeppoon, their current demand. So there was some broader scale, so they nominated a set growth rate, but we sort of assumed a max day for Yeppoon that's currently greater than their current max day and sort of a little bit greater than the projections moving forward. So it was an assumption that was made around that. They didn't have a planning assumptions model to share with us, so some assumptions were made on that growth. However, I believe the max day, and I might defer to my colleague Mr Wheelhouse, but I believe the max day that was assumed for Yeppoon and the Capricorn Coast was still significantly greater than the projected 2.5% as it moved forward.
Okay,
so we've sort of been conservative in what we've assumed the offtake from the Capricorn Coast would be.
Yeah, because I was concerned. I was thinking, it's fair call to say that let's pull it back for the assumption to be less than what the original 4.5 was, to bring it back for Gracemere, but not for Yeppoon, because their growth has been significant.
Yeah, just if I could just add to that through the chair, and I think that's something we definitely need to dig deeper into. We're now moving into our Rockhampton long-term strategy, and that's an aspect we will dig much deeper into, because as you correctly point out, the growth in Capricorn Coast, the growth in the northern suburbs, that sort of stuff will heavily influence our strategy going forward.
Well, yes, because it will affect all of what's happening at the water treatment plant, of course, yeah, perfect. And only the yellow tags, Donna, don't ask anything else. On page 77, with the recommendations, just at the bottom there, once we get to that down the track, 18 years' time or whatever, the ring road part of the strategy, is it worthwhile putting forward a motion now that because at the bottom there it's saying that it would be over the next 18 years, what have I got here, that TMR, it's recommended that council seek assurances from TMR that no aspect of the design effectively prevents future trunk main from being installed within the corridor. If we're wanting to put a future trunk main in going around that ring road route, is it prudent of us to now be putting a motion to the table to go to TMR and ask them to do that, to put that into their design component?
We have, through the chair, we have been having those conversations with Transport and Main Roads for quite some time now, and at present, certainly with their bridging, or the new bridge over the Fitzroy River, they're looking to accommodate a space for a future trunk main to go across, and they've given verbal indication that there's no impediment to a trunk main following that corridor.
Is it worth formalising that with some paperwork?
I think there has been correspondence at council officer level between the two organisations, but I'm happy if council wish to make a resolution to follow that through. That probably wouldn't hurt.
Through the chair, I believe the Department of Transport and Main Roads have said they're happy to provide that infrastructure. It's a question of what council wants to provide at this time, I suppose, whether it's provision for, whether it's the pipe, whether it's just the ferrules to allow the pipe to be hung off it. I suppose that's at the discretion of council as to how they wish to proceed.
Yeah, and through the chair, I've got just to add to that. I mean, part of the looking at the long-term strategy for Rockhampton is we've identified the ring road main as a solution. Is it the best solution? That's the body of work we want to do now, because there's a number of different influences of what might be happening around the region as to how to best address the longer-term supply for Rockhampton. So, yeah, I think we're in a good space with Main Roads in regard to that at the moment, but certainly a council resolution to follow up on that, would probably be beneficial.
Mr CEO, can I defer to you on whether...
Through the chair. Yeah, I'm just going to say, I think it would be better that we come back with another report.
Yep.
That just addresses that more.
That specifics.
Yeah, because I just want to be clear how we frame it and the context.
I don't want to do it on the fly.
Yep.
No.
Okay.
Yep,
so I'm happy to understand the issue.
Yeah.
But I also just wanted to check a little bit with Main Roads on some other issues around that as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's make sure that we that informal.
Do that.
Yeah. Good work. Great piece of work, Mr. Wheelhouse. Well done. Thank you to all you and your team.
Okay. Councillor Smith, then Councillor Rutherford.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. First of all, a comment and a question. Glad we're on the front foot with this, because we certainly wouldn't want to run out of water, and by all accounts we're going to have a very hot summer, but they say that every year, but yeah, I think we're in for a lot of heat coming up. But like everywhere else, we'd probably have a lot more growth at Gracemere if you could get builders. And I think that, that's the same cry everywhere. My question is, in the summary of the Gracemere water strategy, it mentions the Musgrave Street PRVs, 24 to 29, $1 million. And I just wondered where that fits in with Gracemere scheme. It seems to be out of sync. I just wondered how that fits in with Musgrave Street.
So through the chair, as a result of the increased supply to the Athelston reservoirs through to Gracemere, there's a need to increase the pressure of the from Glenmore Water Treatment Plant that pumps through some of those mains. And so along Musgrave Street, and along that whole network, but predominantly Musgrave Street, there's a number of sort of lower off-takes that come off that Musgrave Street main. And so if we're increasing the pressure there, that'll exceed the off-take's ability, I suppose, to contain the water there. So we've got to put pressure-reducing valves on that to make sure that we've got an adequate and appropriate pressure on those off-takes to the Musgrave Street main. So whilst it's not in Gracemere, it's supplying Gracemere, and so we need to put that infrastructure in place, and it's spread out over 5 years as the increase in pressure will be gradual over that period of time. So they won't necessarily all be triggered at once, but they'll be triggered over the 5-year period until we get up to that 1100 kPa pressure within those mains.
Oh, thank you. That makes sense now. And as I always say to people, people like water, not too fast and not too slow. It's got to be the right pressure. And you guys have a lot of work to make sure that that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Rutherford?
It's first world problems, isn't it? A couple, Councillor Fisher, if I could, and
Yes.
probably first one to Martin, about do you have an estimated time frame as to the work looking at whether or not the Ring Road corridor will be the best option?
I expect it's going to take us at least 12 months to work through that process. Seeing the amount of work that just went in producing the Gracemere body of work, and to get a better handle on some of the issues that Councillor Kirkland raised around growth on some of those areas that we supply in Livingston, we need to do a lot more liaison with them, but it's going to be at least 12 months away, I'd suspect.
All right. So I guess my question for asking that was a bit about this. Do we write to or put a motion to the table about the corridor and working with main roads? Does that length of time cause them an issue? Do they need to know whether we're going to need that corridor prior to that 12-month period?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily about the corridor. It'll be more about whether how we accommodate a pipe crossing on the new bridge, and whether we actually want to put that pipe crossing in place as part of the construction of the bridge, or just have an area available to us to go and put it on the bridge sometime in the future. That's probably the discussions I think we need to have. One has minimal budget implications for council, the other one would cost council some dollars up front. So that's sort of the discussion we need to have.
Thank you. And the second, Councillor Fisher, probably to Peter, because it's the finance question. And I'm going to ask Councillor Kirkland's question again in a different way so I can try and get it in my head. So our budget, like I understand that it becomes less clear because Mount Morgan is connected with the Gracemere one. Is there any more money that we need to find in this year's budget?
We have sufficient funds in this year's budget to do the projects that we are about to do, which is the reservoir and the pump station. So,
okay, so we're
right
not
this
looking
year,
at a budget revision at this point in time or anything like that? Okay.
and if any issue comes up, it will come up the next year or the year after, where we're getting more defined prices for all those other things like the pipes.
Yeah.
But right now we're ready and funded to go.
And I get that could be the case. At least we've got pre-warning for those budgets to have to find another 2 million this budget. It would be very difficult.
My only caution I'll give you over this is that right now in our tendering process, we are obviously suffering big escalations, but I believe we've got enough contingency in this budget to cope with this one.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Kirkland?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, just to square off, how often do we go back and revise and review this particular strategy? Like, some of our strategies sit there for 5, 10 years, and I don't know, I don't want this to gather dust. is what I'm saying. So how often do we come back to review it and put in the new data that we've got and review those PAMs?
I can probably take this one, I suppose, through the chair. The way this particular strategy has been written, where we're probably leaning more towards the infrastructure triggers of maximum day demand rather than it'll be this year. And it's because of those fluctuations in demand through population growth, we don't see the strategy changing so much as in this is the infrastructure we need to do, but the timing may change and it will all be tied back to what demand we're seeing in the system. And we do monitor that, FRW monitors that very regularly, and they feed that information to Peter over in our office to do the network modelling and those sorts of things to keep an eye on it. So I don't think the strategy itself may get updated in about 5 years' time. It is supposed to be a long-term strategy, but annually we do keep an eye on the triggers that's happening within them.
Okay. Well, just coming off the back of that, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, just to you, Martin, then those triggers are around the Gracemere demand. Those triggers don't necessarily reflect the other demands within the network. So my question would be, if we're waiting to activate certain parts of this strategy based on just Gracemere demand, is that enough?
It's been answered by that there is another strategy, which is the Rockhampton strategy. So there is effectively, you can nearly argue now there's a Mount Morgan strategy, which is the supply. Now we've got Gracemere, there'll be a third strategy, which is Rockhampton itself, which we'll look at, as it said, a little bit more complex. It looks at the whole of how we operate and the offtake to the coast. So that's the document.
So that would be the overarching document. The Rockhampton one will take into consideration all of the network.
And there's even something above that, which is almost our regional stuff, which is another discussion we'll be talking about, which is Eden.
Angus as well.
It's Angus's work. So that's the level above, which we'll be talking about very soon. So it's a hierarchy almost of strategies, but the Rockhampton one that Martin was talking about will take at least a year, is the one that will pick up on that other stuff.
Okay, good.
Further to that, through the chair, so the triggers for those infrastructure are associated with triggers in Gracemere. The Rockhampton strategy will ensure that there's continuity of service to Athelstane, which will facilitate the continuity of Gracemere. So the triggers around the megalitres associated with Gracemere supply, assuming that we've got that constant supply coming to Athelstane to supply. So the Rocky strategy will look at that aspect of it. Yeah.
Okay, if there's no further questions, Councillor Kirkland as chair, would you be happy to move?
It's a great document to have. I know that it started quite a few years ago and it's been resurrected as a result of some red flags, and it's good to have it. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Smith has raised a hand as the second for the strategy. There's no further questions. All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks to everybody that has been working on this project, because it's quite a mountain of work. So no, very, very appreciated, and really like that we are becoming strategic and looking out over the horizon. That is just so good. Okay, well, we'll move on to item 8.4 now. I was just going to, our councillors are so good, I was just going to give them a chance to go and have a cuppa and have first choice of the sandwiches outside. Okay, we can move on to 8.4, and well, you're a busy man today, Stuart. So across to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through the chair, Council on the meeting on the 14th of June received a petition from a number of residents regarding concerns around the White Street, Lorga Street, Main Street vicinity. The issues raised within that petition, I suppose, are focused on three main things that were raised as part of that. A concrete footpath for pedestrians along White Street and Knight Street, a zebra crossing or similar type facility at the intersection of White Street and Main Street, and connecting the two bits of pathway either side of the road there, and installation of speed limit sign or convex blind curve mirror at the White and Lauger Street intersection. So a lot of these issues have a bit of a history with council. Some of those have been brought to the table historically as well. So officers had investigated several of these matters already. The report breaks those down into the three matters that were raised in the petition, and I'll sort of delve into the detail on those now. So the White Street's defined as a minor urban collector within the planning scheme. As such, a road of that nature is intended to have a footpath, and under CMDG, it would be desirable to have a 1.5 metre footpath on one side of the road. That link from Main Street to Park Street, and then from Park Street for the extent of Knight Street, both of those footpath projects have been identified and are included within the projects identified in the former active transport plan and the current walking and cycling strategy as projects that need to be included for new infrastructure. These projects obviously need to be prioritised against the rest of Council's footpath projects that have been identified, and I suppose that ties in a little bit to what we were talking about with Andrew's asset management plan for the footpaths, that there's a large number of footpath projects and there's a need to go through and prioritise those to ensure that we're doing the, I suppose, highest priority projects within the region. So Council officers are working through that to bring a report to Council to specifically address the footpath projects and the prioritisation of such, so that we can prioritise those. And looking forward, there's no current allocation in the budgets for the next 3 years for footpaths, but beyond that period, looking forward to identify the projects that Council are going to address as part of that moving forward. So the cost of that particular footpath from White to Park is estimated at around $85,000, and that's due to footpath, curb ramps and the works associated with that. That project is included and is something that we need to come back to Council to prioritise in order to determine where that sits in Council's wider footpath capital works program. The question around a zebra crossing at White Street, so officers have previously received a request around these facilities and have undertaken several site inspections and pedestrian counts to understand the crossing and how it operates and how it's being used at the moment. So crossing movements are mainly confined to the school peaks, which makes sense given its proximity to St Joseph's Park Avenue and to Park Avenue schools. In the peak, afternoon peak was the largest peak period, and there was around 26 pedestrians of both adults and children crossing in that particular peak hour. As a means to determine, I suppose, what infrastructure should be provided at these locations, Austroads has a pedestrian facility selection tool where a manner of variables are input from the volumes on the road, crossing site distance, the number of pedestrians, the mix of some of those pedestrians and the cost of potential treatments. And it looks at, I suppose, and assesses which infrastructure would be the most appropriate for use there. As part of that assessment that was undertaken, it had highlighted, I suppose, that a zebra crossing at that location wasn't the best option, I suppose, for crossing facilities there, and that the infrastructure supporting, I suppose, concrete build-outs or the reduction of the crossing distance would potentially be a more appropriate or cost-effective solution there. So, additionally, Council generally has a hesitation to provide zebra crossings where there's not a consistent or number of pedestrians that use that facility. So the reason for that being is that you have, if there's not always expected to be pedestrians there, people get a bit complacent with regards to giving way and stopping and slowing, and it's something that we've felt across a lot of our pedestrian crossings across the region. When it's particularly peaky around school periods, it can sometimes cause dramas outside of those periods when pedestrians go to cross. And there's also additional infrastructure requirements on a zebra crossing to be lit at all times, and there's some further considerations as a part of that as well. So for these reasons, given the climate and the mix of movements there, a zebra crossing wasn't considered, I suppose, as the most appropriate solution. However, on reviewing that intersection, there was some issues, I suppose, that were identified that could be improved to try and improve that infrastructure for the pedestrians that are there. So On the plan, if I could ask just to jump to that attachment 1, and hopefully my little flicker here will work. Karen, if we could just jump to attachment 1, if that's all right, sorry. So the attachment 1 here, so the current arrangement is that the pedestrians come over the rail line here and cross at this point across here, and that's actually quite some distance from the give-way line or the intersection itself. And so vehicles can be queued at this location here, and pedestrians are crossing, and then in that time vehicles can...
Just, Stuart, is there a way that Councillor Smith can see what we're talking about? Okay. Yeah. It's just, I think, what Stuart's...
Oh, sorry, my little flicker. Yeah, sorry, that complicates it a little bit. So that crossing point there, I suppose vehicles have time to turn around and move through there, which can make this a bit more complicated for pedestrians at the moment. So at the moment, this is all painted median, and the island actually starts at this location and moves forward. So pedestrians are more inclined to do a single, one fluid movement of crossing through here, and that, I believe, is where some of the concerns are coming from constituents, that they're starting to do that crossing manoeuvre, and if someone turns around here, they have to stop and are essentially stopping on a painted island. And whilst the stage crossing to cross here and cross there is a safe option, the infrastructure that's currently there doesn't really support that as being safe for the pedestrians that are there. So what is being proposed is to construct, make changes to the raised median that's there, such that pedestrians can cross across this carriageway, stop again, and then cross again. And what that does is reduces the crossing distance for them. And the width there, I will make a correction to the report. I said that it's 1.8 metres. When design looked at it, we could actually facilitate 2 metres, so we could actually get a little bit more. And then the edge lines associated with it actually bring that distance out to 2.3. So but the physical island itself will be 2 metres. So that's the minimum standard for pedestrians to queue within that space, and that allows, I think, someone to have a bike with them if they're off the bike, and that's sort of within the median island. So what's proposed there is that they can cross in a staged manner, which removes some of the concerns, I believe, that the constituents had around crossing movements at that location. Furthermore, the ability to put to reduce that further with median build-outs is made a little bit more difficult by the fact that this is currently a designated B-double route, and so there has to be provision for all vehicles, I suppose, semis and B-doubles, to be able to swing around into White Street as it feeds into Knight Street and the industrial area associated with that. So that's partly how this solution was arrived at. If there weren't B-doubles, there probably still would be the need to have this solution as the semi-trailers drag the trailer in a similar manner as well. So the proposed works there around $25,000 and can be funded through the Road Safety Minor Works program. The last item, which is around a speed sign and a blind corner mirror at White and Lauger Street, has been subject of many customer requests and several reports to council previously. The intersection is essentially located on the inside of a bend and has limited sight distance for vehicles that are turning out of Lauger Street. So whether they be turning left or right out of Lauger Street, their sight distance isn't sufficient to see and perceive a gap in order to turn out. So currently they're doing that with limited sight distance. And partly this is due to some vegetation and fencing obscuring the sight lines, but also due to the adjacent properties and where they are located. Those obstructions, both that with the proximity of the curve, means that your vehicles are doing without sufficient sight distance. So a range of options were looked at, and those options are put forward in the report in order to try and address this. So the first option is to realign Knight and White Street. So that's to push the intersection out away from Lauger Street so that vehicles can creep out and can actually improve their sight distance in order to undertake all movements at that particular location. So that involves us reclaiming some of council's land, resuming some railways land, and also relocating some services to push us out. So we'd be resuming some land here that council owns, some railway land here, moving some infrastructure that's under the road there, and providing some build out so that vehicles could come out to this point and see sufficiently down White Street in order to perceive the gap there. So the estimate on that is around $975,000 and would have to come in as a capital project. The second option, option B, is to convert Lauger Street to a one-way arrangement. So that one-way arrangement, I think, is on the next plan there. So a one-way arrangement that has vehicles entering from Knight Street or White Street and going one way to the north. So that arrangement essentially removes the issues at this intersection altogether by excluding them from being able to happen. However, it is noted that that will have a fairly significant impact on the residents that live in that street as the traffic movements will change, and they'll have to enter this way and exit out via Taylor Street, I think it is, or and out to Park or Main Street, depending on which direction that they wish to go, and that will have some implications for waste and a few things like that as well. So this option, I suppose, is fairly cost effective for council because it's predominantly line marking and signage. It isn't. We have done it in other streets within the region, so it's not uncommon to have done it. And it will require around $6,500 worth of council's money that could be funded under Road Safety Minor Works program as well. The third option, which I suppose has a similar intent to option B, is to have, if I could just go to the next attachment, sorry Karen, is to maintain two-way traffic on Lauger Street, but just prohibit any exiting movements out onto White or Knight Street. So this still means that vehicles can come in from Taylor Street, they just can't exit out onto White or Knight Street. The complexity with that is that the road reserve is such that we can't cul-de-sac the end of Lauger Street, and so the provision in this design is there's a council parcel here that we've provided just a concrete driveway invert on, so that a vehicle, if they were to go down the wrong way, could do a multi-point turn in order to get back out. And it would be supported by signage that says no through road, road ends and local traffic only, to remove, I suppose, the risk of that happening. This option would also have some implications for waste. Because it's one way, the waste truck would come up on one way and residents may have to move their bins onto the other side of the road. But that's not something that's something that Waste have done before and could be undertaken, I suppose, in consultation with the residents that are in that street. There is an option included in confidential to resume land and potentially remove the property that provides obstruction to the site distance. However, that is probably not a preferred option from officers' perspective in terms of the cost, I suppose, and the outcome in that situation, and also involves some resumption of another property adjacent to it in order to ensure that site distance triangles are made available to residents in that street. And whilst it's more cost effective than the option A, it's probably not a preferred option moving forward. The final option that's put forward, and it was the one that was raised by the petition residents, is to install a convex mirror, or what they call a blind corner mirror, at that intersection, so that vehicles on Lauger Street can see better. Department of Transport and Main Roads has a technical guideline on when you can apply these, and as officers we don't like to apply them in higher volume roads, and that's in line with the TMR standard as well. They can, vehicles over 300 vehicles in a peak hour is TMR's preference, but ours is sort of anything more than a laneway or a car park, where our preference is not to install them for a couple of reasons. It provides a bit of a false perception of both speed and distance away from the intersection. It mirrors where the vehicle is, so because it's convex, it shows them on the opposite side of the road, and that can obscure, I suppose, or be a bit strange for constituents. And in the dark conditions, so early morning and late night, it's very difficult to actually see vehicles that are there. So it could provide, I suppose, a bit of a false perception that things are clear when they're not. So based on that assessment, we prefer not to do a convex mirror. And also, as part of the TMR standard, they say that if there's other options that are available, then those options should be pursued rather than a convex mirror probably should be your last resort. So based on those options provided by council, the recommendation from officers is to look at option C, which is to maintain two-way traffic on Lorga, but just to prohibit the movements out onto Knight Street. So this removes the conflict there with regards to vehicles turning out. It still facilitates vehicles turning right in from Knight Street or left in from White Street. And in the counts that were done previously in the peak hour, they are probably the heavier movements of the turning in rather than the turning out of vehicles out of Lorga Street. Noting though that they were done on AM and PM peak periods, and outside those periods there may be different numbers. But based on that officer's recommendation, I suppose in terms of responding to the petitioner is to consider the footpath in terms of our footpath prioritisation, which will come to council in a later report very shortly, to make the changes to that median as per the attached plan, and to pursue option C, which is to restrict movements exiting Lorga Street onto White or Knight Street. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, well, first I'll go to Peter, then Councillor Smith and Councillor Kirkland.
There was a mention of the B double route, and I was just going to ask Stuart to comment on what he thought the benefits may be to remove that B double route and how feasible that is.
Yeah, so through the chair, as it currently stands at the moment, the B double route appears, it's an old legacy route, and the route is to supply, I suppose, the businesses along Knight Street and then down to, I think it is one of the businesses on Horace Street there. So they have the B double route down that way, and there's a notable absence of the last part of Knight Street where it connects to the state network is missing from the B double route. So the preference is to then, under the current gazetted route, is to come via Main Street onto White, Knight and then down to Horace if that's where the destination is. The removal of those legacy routes is historically very difficult to do. It's a process that perhaps we can investigate, but I think should be done more holistically into all of the existing B double routes that council have. The counts that were done on that leg of the intersection has sort of indicated that there weren't a significant number of B doubles using it anyway, which potentially is merit for removing it as a B double route. But I suppose in the context of movements and safety within this area, there might not necessarily be a large number of B doubles that we're contending with at this location at the moment. So it is, something that we could look at, but it's fairly heavily involved with the NHVR process and consultative with industry, and by all means apparently it's a little bit difficult to achieve, but it's something I think that might be worthwhile for council officers to pursue, but perhaps as a more of a broader look across all of our heavy vehicle routes.
I was just going to ask Martin about this because that sounds like a major project to me, and should we consider it for the next op plan to remove the B double?
Through the chair, that's a very good question, General Manager. I would not have the resourcing to do that this financial year. No. It would have to fall into next year's operational plan, I'd suggest. We have enough on our plate, particularly with the TMR works and Parkhurst works and things.
That's why I asked the question.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that, Martin. It was a question I had as well, but it's one of those ones that's, we do get posed those questions as councillors, but also they've got to consider the workload and that as well. We'll go to Councillor Smith.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Probably got comments and questions. I'm really aware that this is a very busy area. My in-laws live not far from here, but also I worked at the Ampol depot for 10 years. In Haynes Street there, and our B doubles, we were the first fuel company to ever get B double fuel carriers. We were never allowed to go Knight Street. We always had to go Alexander Street into Main Street, and I'm not sure how long Knight and White would have been classified as B double routes.
You just broke up. Do you mind?
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering when Knight and White Streets were classified as B double routes because they never were like 30 years ago. And I just thought that puts a lot of traffic in that area and turning into Main Street. I couldn't think of anything worse. Is there such a tight turn there onto the railway line to cross and go down Main Street? But our B doubles always had to go Alexander into Main.
So, Stuart, the question is actually White Street a B double route?
So through the
Not
chair,
not just Knight Street as a B double route.
so through the chair, I believe White is part of the B double route, and it comes off Main Street through there. I don't know how long it has been as such, but it has been gazetted for quite some time, but I don't know when it was brought in as a gazetted route. So it's probably important too to highlight that vehicles that aren't B doubles are still probably undertaking that manoeuvre at Main Street into White Street if they're going to Knight Street, and that's still a particularly tight movement for semi-trailers and the like as well, which have as of right use there. But yes, I'm not sure how long it's been gazetted as a route, but as long as I've been here, it has been one. So it is a little bit difficult, but we're sort of having a discussion before that some of the old legacy routes were sometimes put in place for potentially one business or something like that, which would now be handled under an HVR permit rather than being a specifically gazetted route. So it's a bit of a historical legacy for us.
Yeah, and just to comment also, on the same line, I suppose, I can't see why they need a footpath along White and Knight Streets. I couldn't imagine anyone even using it along there, because it is, a lot of industrial traffic along there with all those businesses on that one side, and the railway, all the old railway shops on the other side are all mainly closed. And I just wondered, what would be the benefit of a footpath through there? Because you're well away from I wouldn't think school children would be walking along there.
I'm happy to speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Firstly there, but...
Through the chair, I suppose there is the necessity, I suppose, for that footpath is there's several residential properties that are to the north of White Street there that, and also the Colts, I think it is, Union Fields are there. However, it also provides a connection from Main Street in that Park Avenue area to the Kershaw Gardens. So partly that was why that those two links together have been included, is that it's providing a connection from Main Street, which is a higher order road, through to the Kershaw Gardens or through to the state network and their wider footpath network that they've just recently constructed, and provides that link in between from residential people through there. So yes, take the point that there is fairly industrial uses there, but I suppose it's beyond that immediate industrial uses highlights where the intent for that footpath network has come from.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, through the chair, you mentioned going to Kershaw Gardens. Is there a pedestrian crossing across the highway there? I've never taken any notice.
From the main roads across, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose I hadn't thought of that. I've certainly never seen too many people walking across there. I think that's all I was going to say. Yeah, it's a hard one. I sort of get in two minds about it really.
So as for the footpaths, are further reports coming back to council, and where those discussions can be had at that time as well? Is that true?
Yeah, so through the chair, we'll bring a subsequent report back, as one of the actions from the walking and cycling strategy was to look at and prioritise some of the new and capital footpath works. And so we've been progressing that behind the scenes with a view to come back to council to put that forward, and looking at that, I suppose, in the context of the region, so of what footpath projects and what budget we've got and how we want to progress forward with some of those. So we're looking to bring that to council in the next couple of committee meetings.
That'd be great, because I think it almost warrants the bus tour, or we might even, as councillors, do a tour of all of those that are highlighted as well. But it'd be great to maybe have yourself and Stuart on a bus and talk about, okay, what are the reasons why this project is over another project, so that we can actually make quite considered decisions.
Through the chair, if you recall, last time we did the current list, I think we provided maps.
Yes.
And we workshopped it here.
Yeah.
Happy to do the site inspection, but also go through it in detail.
Yeah, so through the chair, the intention is to bring, I suppose, the maps and talk through the methodology as to how we've arrived with some of those, and then the prioritisation of those, so that you've got an idea of, I suppose, the process that's arrived with those and whether that's something council's happy with.
No, thank you for that. Councillor Kirkland has been waiting patiently to make comments. So, Councillor Kirkland.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I've been chomping at the bit because I will start by answering the question about how many pedestrians use this street. There are indeed a lot. The school students actually use this street, they come from St Joseph's School. They go along a crossover where the railway crossing is, which is dangerous. Then they walk along the street, on the street, because there's no verge, there's no safe place for them at all. And there's over 600 vehicle movements on this road every day. A great number of those are trucks. And so they're putting their lives at risk every time they go from the school over to the Colts Oval, which is their journey. That's where they're travelling. We've got students as well as residents from all of Park Avenue that use this to walk through with their prams. I've got endless amount of phone calls and emails and certainly Facebook, people asking what we can do about this street because they use it, they don't feel safe, and it's been confirmed today. I would say that I actually, when I saw this report, I would be lying if I didn't say I clapped my hands together with a little bit of glee, because this has been certainly a major thing for the division that I represent. People have come back to me so many times, and that's why that petition was raised, I have no doubt. And as you look at the people on that petition, they represent not just people from the area, the direct vicinity, but also from farther afield, because their children are the ones that are using that street during those school hours. So it is definitely a great project to be putting a footpath in there. And the second, I did want to ask a question around that, is if there is a high priority pathway, as we would use the matrix, Stuart, would there be the opportunity, even though there's no budget for new footpaths for the next 3 years, is there an opportunity at all for there to be high priority footpaths added into the budget? How do we go about doing that? Is that something that can be done?
Peter, I might defer to you there.
Yeah, I think that one's...
Yeah, okay, through the chair, yes, the answer is yes. The council can resolve to pick that project or any other project and have it funded this year and define the funds.
Okay, thank you. That's a great answer.
Typically, it all means something else will
And it would need
drop
to
off
be,
or whatever.
Everybody else would need to be on board with that as well, obviously. I did want to ask the question about the B-double route, so I'm glad that you asked that, Peter. I was definitely going to ask whether we could remove it as a B-double, but acknowledging that a great amount of the movement aren't even B-doubles, they're just, cement trucks and trucks in general going very fast. This is, I use this route myself so often, as many of the people of our community do. And the median strip, I did have written down here, is it safe? Because you had mentioned in the report that it was that 1.5. I'm glad that you have updated that to being a 2 metre physical island there, and the fact that that allows for a bike. And certainly for those children travelling from school down to Colts Oval, there'll be an opportunity, obviously, with a teacher to guide them across there, and only having to navigate one flow of traffic instead of the two will be a lot safer. How long will it be to deliver that particular part of this, given that it's funded?
Yeah, so we can rate. The design obviously has been done at an initial preliminary level, and then I suppose it's the ability for our civil ops team to get in and physically build it. But they've generally been fairly quick on some of those ones that have resulted from road safety minor works or council resolutions, but I'd have to take on notice, and I can come back and inform you once we've sort of told them, Councillor Kirkland, as to a time period of when that works will occur. But I'd have to confer with our civil operations colleagues to see where it fits into their program.
That'd be great, because I know that the community will be asking me that question.
Yeah.
So if you can get back to me, put that on notice, that would be great. I also wanted to ask around the options for Lauger Street. Now, because this is a public document, it went up, certainly anyone could have gone on and had a look at what the meeting was going to be about today, and they could have seen this report. I went out and door knocked all of Lauger Street because I wanted to know what their thoughts were. I wanted to know if they were happy with this. The fact that you've recommended option C, I can come to you and say that categorically the answer is yes, yes, yes and yes. They're very happy with it. There were a couple of suggestions they'd even be happy with one way. So, but it was that they were understanding about the changes of bins. They were happy to take that on board. And even as I was doing my walking and certainly driving to Lauger Street to do that, I was coming northbound and almost was collected myself was going to turn right into Lauger Street from there, but the traffic is so fast up your rear end, and then there was a car came out of nowhere coming around the elbow there from the north travelling south. So I changed my mind and went the long route, and that conversation came up. I'm wondering if in that option C, I can't see there whether there's going to be a sign saying no right-hand turn. Can we, coming north off, travelling Knight Street, it's becoming White Street, turning right into Lauger.
Turning right in.
If you can have no right-hand turn, all of the residents were happy for that as well because it's so dangerous. Is that a consideration that can be put into the scope, please?
Through the chair, yeah, we can consider it if it's generally supported by the residents. The movement is not a big impost on council to put up a no right turn sign through there, and remove that movement out if that's a preference.
I certainly did mention to them in my discussions yesterday, just doing that door knock asking, and they were all, yeah, it's dangerous.
Through the chair, that was probably one of the heavier movements of turning in from Knight into Lauger. It was the heaviest, was that right turn in. So I don't know whether the residents, well, they're happy enough with it, but it's a dominant movement into Lauger Street. So we're happy to.
Well, potentially with your consultation.
Yeah, just for the chair, my thinking is that council will make a decision on this, and council will then need to go and consult with the community on the option. Because I'm not questioning your consultation, but if the formal council says this is the preferred...
Yes, so Operation Council.
We will consult with
the
preferred option that you select.
Happy with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Through the chair, we have to consult with regards to bin waste and things like that. So as part of that, we can take the option to them and ask for comment on it.
Yeah. Well, it was well received. Anyway, the way it stands, it was well received. So everybody's very excited. There's been a number of years, and people that live there for many years are pleased to hear it. It's quite often used as a cut through. They're hoping that will help stop that as well.
Yeah.
Good.
How long to deliver risks for the children?
So it's probably through the chair, probably envisage that there works that, depending on, I suppose, the consultation process, but we'd try and deliver those two works together at the median end at any works that had to be done at Lauger Street. But it just depends, I suppose, on the time frame for the consultation, and that may impact that. We may do the intersection first and then come back to Lauger Street works.
Yeah, if just please keep me in the loop, that'd be great, and I can keep those residents in the know. Finally, can council go back to the option A down the track if it turns out that this is still it's not working?
Council
like in years, I mean.
Council can change its mind or do another resolution, another project at any time.
Okay.
So you can do it next week. Not really, precision. You can't
not for $1 million, I don't think.
This is just, you're adopting what is you consider the best solution today.
Yeah, this is the more achievable thing right here, right now. So that's very good. Yeah, thanks.
Through the chair, in terms of what the option will achieve, it'll, in terms of the concerns raised by the residents, it'll address those. So I wouldn't imagine that we will have to come back to it, but yeah, if council wish to at a later date, we can come back and look at
just the in the conversations that I had, the number of stories of so near calls of serious incidents, and understanding that in the report there weren't very many incidents that had been reported. The residents weren't all telling me about the same incidents. They were telling me all kinds of stories, so many. And so it's a great thing. This is a good thing for them, their peace of mind. Thank you.
Councillor Latcham.
Thank you, Mayor. Just following up for Councillor Kirkland's suggestion, if you were to have a no right turn into Langer Street, essentially you're blocking that road off, would do the same trick. Is that something to be considered?
Yeah, so there's two parts, I suppose, through the chair, there's two parts to it. There's the vehicles that are turning out of Lauger Street that have no sight distance, and then there's the right turn of the vehicles turning in. Yeah, potentially by banning that movement, yeah, we address some of that issue for those right turners in terms of sight distance. But they've got we could do some vegetation trimming there that might potentially improve that right turn treatment without having to remove it, I suppose, as well. Is an option that we could look at moving forward.
I guess what I was suggesting is if that is considered to block it off, you don't have to worry about $1 million treatment to do option A. So it'd be blocked off.
Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions. Councillor Smith, as committee chair, are you happy to move as recommended?
Yeah, I will move it, Mr Chair. Like, we're only saying we're considering the footpath, but I think that's a great idea of yours to have a look at some of these that are on the top of the list, or ones that we have on there because of safety, etc. Because, you know, making decisions on maps is not always good, and it's great to have a look, have a real good look and see if that's what we really need. And probably this one would be a good one to inspect at school time, and that's always the best time to have a look and see what's happening with all the traffic and everything. Yeah, I'm happy to move it. Doesn't mean to say we're going to do it tomorrow.
Councillor Kirkland is Divisional Chair. Councillor, you're happy to second?
Very happy, thank you.
All those in favour? And that's carried unanimously. So, councillors, no notices of motion. Oh, we better bring it back out to. There's probably no sandwiches left. I was almost going to close the meeting without you guys.
We were starting to wonder whether everyone had gone to lunch and
Yeah.
left us in there.
Okay. There are no notice of motion. No. Any questions on notice? No questions. No urgent business or yes, Councillor Wickerson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. With your indulgence, some of this is of a urgent nature and some of it's not. Just to give a brief update from the District Disaster Management Group meeting held yesterday, maybe a couple of moments for that. And
it's right for open session?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And attended that with Martin Crowe, and so you can try me if I've left some gaps in it. So this meeting was a couple of hours, so it'll be a very high-level sort of overview of it. But any questions if you want to take offline. So the first one is from BOM, basically giving us a bit of a short and then longer term weather outlook. Now due to some heating in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, that's what they gauge their modelling on. They're predicting greater probability of rainfall. They couldn't go into the detail of how many millimetres we're going to get, but it was fairly widespread across the eastern part of the whole of Australia, and obviously we're involved with that too. So that was nothing to be alarmed about, but certainly that all of the agencies represented there, from QFIS right through to the police and SES, are all aware of this, and they're making the right preparations. They briefly touched on biosecurity. Of course, we hear on the news pertaining to Indonesia, particularly foot and mouth disease, and they wanted to clarify that while the media love to run with this, that the risk has always been there, and they're going to just wanted to make clear that it is slightly elevated, but nothing much has changed in their world. It's always been there, always got to be diligent about importing food products and other things like that. But they said, yeah, nothing to be overly alarmed about. The problem's always been there. There's a project coming up, and it's on the back of one, and I think it was called a person-centred emergency response or something like that. So basically, it's how do you engage with people with disabilities. This was the initial project because they're at a much higher risk when a disaster comes along, especially if they're in their home and semi-independent, getting out and getting the message that they need if they might have a hearing impairment. So that was the initial project, but now they're going to expand that to homeless people as well, people that are homeless for the same reason. Just because they don't have a dwelling doesn't mean they're not impacted by disaster, possibly even more in some cases, you know. So this project involves a workshop on the 28th of October, which certainly hope to attend and just work out how the different agencies, including council, can respond to that. A brief update from a fellow called Mick Allen from the NBN. They've got a major incident management team, and basically what they wanted to present was that enhancing their infrastructure, rollout infrastructure in the time of a disaster. So because we're so reliant on internet and everything from particularly our more critical infrastructure, so water treatment, hospitals, ourselves here, and also the disaster management centres themselves, that those places will have very rapid response kit. I think the two things I mentioned was muster trucks, quite impressive, big trucks full of stuff to make sure that we've got that connectivity, and also smaller kit called flyaway kits, which is more sedan, small van type vehicles that they can roll out quickly to make sure that where it's critical, initially that services will be provided, but also for residents as a secondary, so that you can get on and contact your neighbours or your relatives away and let them know you're safe. A briefing from QFIS, Queensland Fire and Emergency Services, and the main one was to address the Australian fire danger rating system. So people would recognise the quite clunky manual adjusted signs with the arrow when you go through bushfire areas. And what they reported back, and this came from a Royal Commission after many other bushfires, the limitations of that system. It's manual, people get a bit fatigued seeing it, they think that it's not highly reliable because who comes out and shifts the arrow, or a vandal shifted the arrow, so you tend not to notice when you tune out. So the new system basically goes to a solar-powered digital system, a bit like we've rolled out at Stanwell, Bajul, and on the way to Alton Downs, I think there's one as well. So basically the digital VMR board the council has put 3 out. Obviously these things are quite expensive, so they've already taken out many of these, call them analogue signs, the arrow, and they'll be replacing them with a lesser number but more strategically placed digital electronic versions of it. The benefits are that it can be tailor-made with not just the arrow but a more simpler to read and more meaningful messaging. So instead of just saying your fire rating is high, it might say, you know, get out now, or prepare to evacuate, or whatever. So a bit like our system. So that's good. I know you'll be interested where they're going, so they pulled out a heap of these things, pardon me, and I think I'll get this just about right. So for our interest here, they're going back in these new ones at the top of the range to Mount Morgan, on our Gladstone boundary, so down in my patch there, Bajul and Marmore, Bouldercombe, but I couldn't quite pick up where the Bouldercombe one was, Bruce Highway near the Caves, and Yeppoon Road near Department of Agriculture out there where the disaster centre often meets. So that's interesting to see. Huge money in these things to roll. I think there was something like 600 across the state or so. Also, in addition to that, they've changed the actual wording. We used to just talk about bushfire. Well, now that's sort of a fairly broad catch-all and doesn't quite pick up on the different fuel loads and whatever. So I picked up on some of this. It's now grass fire, forest fire, spinifex fire, and other levels. So it's more detailed about what type of fire it actually is. Now, the other interesting thing, and Mayor and I think Martin and I met with this fellow from the 42nd Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Gandy from the ADF, and basically on the 14th to the 17th of October, so very soon, they're having a major exercise called Rockhampton Ready, I think it's called. So in short, it'll involve 100 troops from the 11th Brigade, armoured vehicles, basically quite fancy and expensive drones, helicopters, and a new range of specialised emergency response vehicles, but through ADF. So there's a meeting, an online meeting, or in-person meeting at 1 o'clock that Martin and I hope to tune into with a bit more detail. It's all very quick to be put together, so it's a lot to get done in a short time. But as part of that exercise, and it'll be based in Rockhampton and Shoalwater Bay, basically the scenario is that that route has been cut with major inundation that overwhelms local disaster response, so that the ADF get called in. So it's how do we do that? Who do we call? Once up at Shoalwater Bay, there'll be a search and rescue. So it's sort of ADF based, but our role in it as well. And then there's also going to be a major open day at our showground. So obviously we need to work closely with ADF about what that looks like. Basically to raise community education, to raise their confidence that we've got the capacity with the ADF to do it, and to show off their kit, because some of this kit they're bringing in is quite high tech and new to see, so that's good. And just one little thing that they brought up, which was interesting, that the maps that the ADF use, they'll talk about grid references and all sorts of stuff that, if you watch any movie, they do that. We use a different system, so straight away ADF are talking about grid AZ or whatever, and we don't know what that means. So it's just getting the different agencies and the ADF in communication with each other and talking the same language, literally being on the same page. So a lot to be gained from it, but a massive project too in a short period of time. So we're confident they'll do it, and Marty and I and others will be liaising to make sure that what our role is and how we can satisfy that. So it's exciting, and they had one in Mackay, was it a year ago? Some time ago. Hugely successful, so we're hoping to mimic that here and probably all our way up the coast. So that's in a nutshell what we talked about.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Wickerson, Councillor Kirkland.
May I ask a question, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
through to you, Councillor Wickerson? Just on the warning system, the bushfire warning system,
Yes.
the solar panel one, is that also for floods? And because I did hear that that was happening as well from the water side of things. Is it the same system?
Now, they did talk about that yesterday.
No, the answer is no. This is an independent...
No, the bushfire rating system is a separate system, but there is a national alignment happening of other hazard type warnings, so we can get consistency across the whole nation. So that's in train as well.
Yeah, the conversation around having cameras, so if people see the warning and then they decide to proceed regardless, insurance companies will get that footage and they don't get their insurance because they did that themselves. It's very interesting.
And just to add a little bit to that too, that the three signs that we rolled out, for the same reason we can update them really quickly. There's no reason why that when there is a bushfire event that the similar data that's on this new system, this digital system, can't be mimicked on ours, because that was the intent of it, that we can get instant messaging up there, a higher degree of confidence that it's accurate and timely, and there's also a call to arms, so not just saying, a big fire coming, it's what you need to do, so it's very, very clear and easy to read quickly, so it should save lives.
Very good. Councillor Rutherford?
Thanks, Councillor Fisher, and this may already be in train, but I was just wondering, given that the talk is for a very wet sort of introduction into summer, that we will go check all those drains out, particularly, the draining of detention basins and things
Very
like that,
good.
so that we've got a good flow to get water away, and that our backflow prevention valves are okay and clear. I know in the past it only takes a little rock to be in one of them to allow leakage to get through, so some sort of program that looks at checking all those things.
We do have a list of hot spots and the backflow valves and all that we will check.
Yep. All right, thank you.
Very good point. Now, Councillor Wickerson, would you like to move that you gave a verbal report to the committee, just so that it's
Yes.
on the record of the correct term?
The DDMG, so District Disaster Management Group.
Yes. So if you move, sorry, Karen, I just said so it's on the book.
Just do that, please.
Councillor Wickerson there presented a verbal report on the DDMG.
Yeah, and I should have clarified right from the start. Sorry, DD, District Disaster Management Group presentation. So just to clarify, there's different levels of this. There's a State Disaster Management Group, Naturally Queensland. The district disaster group covers Rockhampton, Yeppoon, and I think Central Highlands. Is that right, Pete? There was, and maybe some others. And then we have...
I'm on a different wavelength.
And then
Sorry.
next later, and then we have the LDMG, which our mayor is chair of, and I'm deputy chair, and that's the local disaster management group. So Livingston have one, and they'll be involved in this military exercise as well. Obviously, Rocky has one, and basically every region has one. So it's different layers, and we communicate.
Through the chair for next time, I would not deem this as urgent business.
Yeah.
Or the military one was. That's what I was thinking.
And there should be a written report provided to the...
I don't know if it is.
Okay. That's my advice, Chair. Okay.
Yes,
I would have suggested next time that should have been a written report, and it's not urgent business.
Yeah, no, I agree, Mr Chair. It's just that particularly with this ADF exercise, that it's so soon and looming, I didn't want council to hear about it without at least getting a bit of a heads up. But yes, absolutely in future, written and detailed, and I might even handball that to Marty. No, I'm happy to prepare.
Yeah, but thank you for the report, and actually the intentions, I think, were really very good, because nothing worse than reading something in the media about something that council is participating or conducting. So it's been moved by Councillor Wickerson, seconded by Councillor Mathers. All those in favour? And that's carried. And if there is no further business, I declare the meeting closed at 12:24. Now, when do you want to start?
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine. Everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line. Ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine. Everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line. Ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming.
Taking the good with the ups and downs. I wanna see how the world turns round. Let's go adventure in the deep blue sea. Home is with you wherever that may be. Home is with you wherever that may be.
Now that we've arrived here, I would not change a thing. Knew that we'd survive here and all the goodness we would bring. Of this I sing. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind. Everybody swimming in sunshine, everybody feeling fine. Everybody join the front line, ain't nobody left behind.